us. And start with Kathy again.
Okay, Kathy Kahara, East Side at Large, based out of Bend, Oregon.
Bruce Korn from Ontario, representing Eastern Oregon.
I'm Meg Reeves from Corvallis, from the West Side at Large.
I'm Bob Baumgartner from Target, and I'm representing the Northwest region.
And I'm Mike Bont, representing the southern section of Oregon.
Eric Quems from Adams, Oregon, east of Pendleton, out in the Blue Mountains, pretty rural area, representing North Central.
I'm Tom Byler, Water Resources Department Director.
Jennifer Randstrom-Smith, Committee Assistant. And prior to my time here, I was at the Oregon Legislature for the last 5 years. Prior to that, at the state courts. I'm excited to be here.
Good. We're happy to have you here.
Cindy Smith with the department.
The gavel bangs.
Right. Claire?
I'm Claire Clark, Clackamas, play two hats, Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District, that can serve as technical expertise, and then act as a resource advocate on my own for natural resources at agencies such as Water Resources, and will be testifying on behalf of budget, this legislative stuff. So two hats.
Ken?
Good morning, Ken Starr. I'm with the Oregon Water Resources Department. I manage the surface water hydrology section.
Sean Ortiz-Turner. I'm a programmer data analyst with the Information Services here.
Good morning, Brenda Bateman, Administrator for Technical Services Division of the Department.
I'm Justin Iverson, Manager Groundwater Section for the Department.
Craig Kohanek. I'm a hydroelectric project analyst and also work on in-stream water right application processing.
Kirk Mogg, Stoll Reeves, representing Arnold Irrigation District.
You're up, Kyle.
I'm Kyle Gorman. I'm the Region Manager for South Central Region. I work out of Bend, over here for the commission meeting for the Klamath items yesterday, and then the Arnold mitigation thing today. Thanks.
And I'm Lisa Snyder, the ASD Administrator with the Department.
All right, thank you. Let's see, what's up for, discussion of minutes is our agenda item. Discussion of minutes, not just approval of minutes. So maybe you want to talk about that, Tom?
Yeah, Commissioners, you may recall, I think at our last meeting, I proposed a different approach to our minutes. For a long period of time, we've had pretty in-depth, comprehensive minutes that we have developed, which are are very handy. But in this day and age, there is the opportunity to have the audio posted on the website. And what we discussed at the last meeting is shifting toward posting audio, which we now have for these meetings going forward. And as a result, shifting the minutes themselves, the written minutes, to a much more abbreviated style. And wanted to check in with you, because there was a little bit of discussion at the last meeting about, well, how much content does there need to be? So I'll be curious about if you have any input on that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that what we try to do with this is there's a link for each agenda item, so that if anyone has an interest in those items, they don't have to scroll through the whole audio file. They can hit the link on these minutes to be able to go directly to the agenda item, which I think will help people navigate a little more quickly and easily going forward. So I'm just interested in open discussion if folks have any feedback.
Would anyone like to weigh in? Yes.
I think they're great. I'd like that you just summarize what the action was, and then you can link right to the details. It's fairly straightforward, and you get probably much more details than what our staff was trying to do before. So I like this process. So.
Any other commissioners?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. I agree too.
Yeah, I like it. It's
Yeah. It seems more efficient for everybody. The people who want to listen, or the people who want to know what happened, and the people who are doing the minutes, and, yeah. And this, I mean, I feel like the level of detail you've got in here is fine. It tells, any action is reported in the minutes, and that makes sense to me.
Great.
Yeah. So are we also approving these today? And we should do, we got two sets here, right? Our commissioners...
May I interrupt a little bit, please?
Sure.
Okay. Claire Clark, Clackamas Conservation District, and there's been other agencies that have done this. And I find that it's really helpful, especially with the exact item, because there might be one item that I'm doing, and then I might be attending another agency meeting while you're meeting, or to a like in this case, a legislative session or something like that. So this has helped, and I believe it is DEQ that has done this, and I think a couple of other agencies are on the way. So it is a very practical and useful thing for advocates of the agency. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do commissioners feel like you're ready? Have you had enough time to look at the minutes, and are you ready to vote on them? Okay, I'm going to take that as a... Yeah. I was going to just do first September and then November.
So I'd move to approve the minutes for September 5th meeting in Joseph, Oregon. I should say September 5th, 2018.
Second.
All righty. Got a second?
September
Yes.
5th and 6th?
5th.
5th, 6th, and 7th.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me restate that, September 5th, 6th, and 7th. It just seemed like we should keep it simpler to the single day, but I see what you're saying. We need to make sure we cover the whole span, so, yeah. So if the second...
Second's fine still.
Second. So, are we ready to vote on this? Yes, Kathy?
Yes.
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 Yes, I was present only for the 6th and 7th.
Okay. All right.
And Madam Chair, I would make this second motion if I could. I'd move that we approve the Water Resource Commission meetings November 15th, get all the dates here, and 16th.
Got a second?
Second.
All right, got a second. Okay. All those in favor? Oh, no, we have to do it, we have to do individual votes. Kathy, please.
Yes.
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 Good.
Thanks. I'll abstain since I wasn't present.
Okay, so we're set on the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is commissioner comments. Why don't we start on this side of the room today? Eric, would you like to add any comments?
Sure. Good morning. I very much enjoyed the information and the discussion on groundwater topics yesterday. I think that, that's something I began thinking about back in 2008. We were, in my day job, we're talking about the links between surface and groundwaters and the need to recognize that link and manage them as a linked resource. And it's a very challenging need. It's one thing to manage surface water. It's a little easier to manage things that people can see and is more tangible to them and can understand easier. But there are ways to measure, track, and monitor groundwater. I think it has large and extensive implications for our work and for the state in the future in many basins moving forward. So I appreciate the department's work on the topic and the presentations. I think it's something we'll be revisiting again in other basins in the future. And then I wanted to wish Cindy well and hope that she goes off and has a lot of fun.
Thank you, Eric.
And I'd really like to echo Eric's comments about yesterday's meetings and the conversation about the groundwater. For me, looking at that science, the detailed science, is so important for us to make informed decisions. It also brought to mind the importance of this, of the planning. I couldn't put that together without reading that, apparently. So important for everyone to be on board from the beginning of the process and not try to catch up at the end. I think that was one of the things that, having watched at least one other agency that's worked in the place-based planning and how well that process works. So I'm pleased that we're trying to get more money this year, but certainly we need to focus on that for the future for the entire state. And then I also want to say goodbye to Cindy, sadly, and we really enjoyed what short time I've been here, really enjoyed working with you. And I want to say, Jennifer, welcome, but you certainly got some big shoes to fill there too. So, and I know you'll do a great job. But it just was such a pleasure to say goodbye last night, but officially say goodbye today, sadly, and wish you well, and hope you'll keep me posted on how you're supposed to do the the summer or the wintertime warm weather trips there. So, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One of them is I do want to touch on, it's been a nice wet February, which has made a huge difference for us and our water management, at least up in the Northwest, and that's a good thing. Rather saved our bacon, I think, this year. And I also want to note that one of my side jobs is with the Pacific Northwest Clean Water Association. We go back and attend Water Week back in D.C. every spring. This year, it looks like there will be lots of funding for infrastructure and infrastructure improvements, which I think is a major change over the last several years. So that's good to see. And like everybody else, I did want to reflect a little bit on the issues that we discussed yesterday. Clearly, the problems we're dealing with groundwater are very difficult problems, perhaps even approaching a wicked problem. They're complex both in scope and in detail both, and being able to understand the broad scope of the basins we deal with and the detail down to individual springs and farms is exceedingly difficult. That becomes important because there are many, many competing interests and needs for a very limited resource. As Eric pointed out, that resource influences both surface water and groundwater. And the other thing that strikes me, as we heard yesterday and have heard before, that the decisions we make have very big impact on individuals as well as more broadly on the resources. And that does come across both in the passion of what we've heard and the perceptions of how people present their understanding of information, which does have the ability to perhaps cast the seeds of doubt on some of the decisions we make. And I'm not sure that I have a recommendation for that other than to note I personally did feel that I would like to have more information and a better understanding of the decisions we make. I think Ivan Gall did a great job presenting the information yesterday, and one point that he did make really struck with me is that some of the decisions we make are very technical issues, and some of them are policy issues, but that line is often blurred, or at least the technical issues and the policy issues often merge. And that's what I think I'd like to have a better understanding of as we approach some of the decisions. And so that's something I'd like to see the department help us with as we move through. And I'm encouraged with the amount of professionalism and detail that we are developing, especially out in the Harney Basin. I think that will really help us all. Unlike what you've heard from some of the other commissioners, I do not want to say goodbye to Cindy. I don't think I have much of a choice with that, so I will, and I will miss you greatly. And Jennifer, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Bob. Kathy, you want to
Sure.
say comment?
Well, mainly what I've been looking at for the last, few months is our snowpack and, hoping and praying that we'll actually get some weather, and it seems like it finally decided to get here, for which I am extremely grateful, even though I hate driving in it. Yesterday's discussion was very interesting and enlightening to see where all the different levels of misunderstanding of what science is and what science means to individuals in the Klamath and probably across the state. They're not alone in not understanding the science, and then even me as a water science person still has some trouble with it. So, good luck on education. I think you're going to need it. And Cindy, I'll see you at karaoke.
Did you go?
Only with my snores.
You're up, Joe.
Yeah, I'll start there. It's been wonderful, Cindy. Thank you. And Jen, already, it's wonderful having you here. So I'm sure we'll see more of you, Cindy. Bob's point, Commissioner Baumgartner's point, is one I'd like to echo and really commend the staff. I mean, we got a display of it yesterday, but I know that in the field, staff run into it all the time. Extremely frustrated landowners who, admittedly, sometimes that frustration runs over into expressions that I think don't intend to be, but are very personal. And I think over the last year, I've seen staff subject to that and stand up professionally in very difficult situations. So thank you for doing that. I think it's critically important that we hear that and not turn away from it and not bark back, but listen. I think that distinction between decisions around science or information, decisions about policy, which ultimately are values decisions, questions about what do we value, we're always going to be faced with those, again, what we saw yesterday, that policy decisions are going to have effects on some individuals, some operations, some organizations more than others. And I hope that we always are able to give staff the flexibility and the discretion in the field to address some of those inequities, quite frankly, in how our Western water law distributes this incredible public good. So, again, thank you. I mean, it's really, really impressive to know how long many of you have dealt with that situation and come back to work excited and professional every day. So thank you.
I do appreciate the conversation we had yesterday and the discussion we had about all the different issues. And we also saw those whose lives are being, in some cases, perhaps forever because of decisions that are made and direction of policy going, and that we need to be, conscious and sensitive to those things that are going on, and as much information as we can have to make the best decisions possible under the laws and circumstances we have to deal with, the better off we are. If we're making decisions only half understanding the issue, and Bob and I talked about this yesterday when we was driving back from the meeting, that, probably more information at times rather than less to really understand, how policies are developed so we can make the best decisions possible. Cindy, appreciate all that you've done in the time I've been on here, and past commissioners, in our area have been from just a few miles apart, and I know, like Commissioner Barlow, wanted to express his appreciation to you, and Representative Bentz, and on and on and on, that you've worked with all the way back from our area. And Jen, we welcome you, and it seems like you're continuing in the footsteps without a hiccup, so we appreciate that. The main thing I want to talk about today was kind of like Kathy did, is the snowpack. I mean, to me, our last meeting, it was gloom and doom, and a weather forecaster that can't get the storms right in 2 days. Sometimes they pretend to be able to, project 10 years in the future, or 20 years, or 100 years, and we all recognize that the science there is really variable, and a degree or two shift in this storm track and changes from a severe drought to a situation where looks like we're going to be okay. In the east, the Waihees and Malheur, Lake County, Harney County, all through the season, we've looked looked like we was trending higher than the West was. The West was, when you look at percentages, was looking pretty short, but these last 2 or 3 weeks have dramatically changed the picture for all of us, because we was still pretty skeptical even in the East. I've just looked at the snowtail sites. It's something I look at every day from December on, and reservoir storage. Why he's 123%, but 123% right now is pretty significant. We've had a lot of wet storms. Our watershed is pretty well widespread coverage. We're confident, really confident we'll have adequate to irrigate with, and fairly optimistic that we could see a full reservoir, possibly with, a spilling situation in the Waihee. Malheur, somewhat similar. Their percentages are higher, 130%. Their reservoirs are a little lower. It's a much smaller drainage and watershed, but things are looking pretty positive there. And then you just kind of go on down in the Klamath, some of the issues are going to be a little less in there because you're at 96% on the Klamath for snowpack. I mean, that is a really, really positive thing. We saw that in 2017. The problems were less there than they were last year when we were short again. So these are just really, really positive things that we've been blessed as a state just in the last few weeks, and really kind of late in the season where it was beginning to think that we was going to be looking at a drought situation, and here we are looking at a relatively optimistic situation. Even the lowest ones are in the 80s, so and these are getting to be later season. What are we, 75-80% through our snowpack season, so it looks like we're going to have a much better water year this year, and that will make all of the staffs and the departments and irrigators and municipalities and environmental, all the concerned parties will have a much easier situation this year to deal with, it appears, especially if we can continue in this track for the next few weeks, and it looks like we are when you look at storm systems coming. So I think that's really positive, and we're at the mercy of nature and storm tracks, and from season to season everything varies, and it seems that we're trying to be more proactive, though, rather than reactive to the situation. When I first came on a few years ago, I mean, it was after a series of droughts, 14, 15, 13, that was trying to play catch-up all the time. But now it seems like the department is working more to install policies that will be proactive to reacting to the situation ahead of the time, which makes it easier and for those concerned to be able to react and deal with the situation. So appreciative of that, and I think we continue to do what we're doing. There's all kinds of projects going on around the state. We do the grants and we see all the things that are happening there, but I know on the local level we see all kinds of conservation projects, updating and getting more efficient in what we do, using the resource which we have in a better way, and making it possible that we can more fully meet the needs of everyone in the state through cooperative interaction. The Harney situation yesterday and the cooperation that's going on there, I think, is really an example where place-based planning is in place, groundwater studies, all the things are working together for the common good. The problems are huge. The problems are but they are solvable when everybody works together in a spirit of cooperation. And if we can do that, I think then we can meet the needs of the state in a way that will be for the good of all rather than the detriment of some, or some cases everyone feels like they come up short. So if we can continue to move in those kind of directions, I think the state's headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. So I guess I want to echo what commissioners have already said about the challenges that we talked about and learned about yesterday. And I would only add that during the Harney discussion, I was thinking about the challenges of taking that technical information that's underway and will be turned into a report and turning it into a management regime. And then we moved to the Klamath, where you have the overlay of a body of people, at least, that don't trust the science, much less the way it's being translated into a management regime, which is very challenging. And I also want to commend the staff, because we do see over and over again how professional they are in the face of a lot of criticism. So appreciation for all of that effort. I want to tell you guys about something that I haven't brought up before, because it's not exactly in our wheelhouse, but I think it's relevant and very interesting. This is from my OWEB work, and it's the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. And I don't think we've talked about that at all, and I just wanted to kind of do a brief overview of it. The program is not funded yet, but there is a bill moving through that would fund it, and we'll see whether, hopefully it will get some funding. So the OWEB, this program is housed in OWEB, and the strategic priority that is being addressed is this. The value of working lands is fully integrated into watershed health. And working lands is, the short version is basically lands managed by an agricultural owner or operator for agricultural purposes. It can be a pretty broad definition. And it was, the idea was as I understand it, I wasn't around for the inception, but was the brainchild of a coalition of organizations, which itself is an interesting coalition, so I just want to tell you what it is. It was the Cattlemen's Association, the Farm Bureau, the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts, the Nature Conservancy, the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, and Sustainable Northwest. And what the bill does is create a suite of tools, I guess, that are designed to keep working lands in working land status, but also improving a natural resource value, fish and wildlife habitat, or other resource values. And the tools that are created in the bill are conservation management plans, a conservation covenant, a conservation easement, and funds for programmatic development of succession planning for people in agriculture. And as I said, the program is housed in OWEB because it is essentially a funding, a granting entity, or granting mechanism. It also, part of the reason, it can fold into federal funds that would also be available for similar purposes. So it's housed in OWEB, and it created an Agricultural Heritage Commission, which is a separate group of board members like us who are kind of managing the program on the ground. They're developing the rules, and they are actually adopting the rules, but the funding mechanism, the whole program is housed in OWEB essentially because it is a granting entity. And so the rules state the benefits of the program, and how they describe it is increased economic viability of Oregon's agricultural operations and economic sector, reduced conversion of fragmentation of Oregon's working lands, and enhanced fish or wildlife habitat, water quality, and other natural resources on Oregon's working lands. So it's kind of melding, making agricultural land continue to be viable, and also enhancing fish and wildlife habitat, environmental considerations at the same time. The funding proposed is $10 million. I have no idea what its prospects are. I guess that's hard to say, but it's working its way through, and see what happens there. So anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that that's out there, that it exists, and I'll come back and let you know about the funding. So, Cindy left.
Can I follow up on that just
Yeah,
briefly?
please. You probably have
I'm glad you brought
more
that up, Meg,
information.
for a couple of reasons. Today's OWEB's 20th birthday, and there's cake cutting going on in 30 minutes. Should we adjourn? No? Is there a second to that motion? I think that OHP is something that fits very well with the discussions we had during our strategic planning session, and even the visit to Woody Wolf's Ranch outside Enterprise. You see the integration of, the creativity that he and others, the risk they're willing to take to get involved in a state-funded and federal-funded program, but then the benefits that when you can access some of these programs, the benefits to the operation and the benefits to the regional economy, you see it spell out. Oregon, quite frankly, has a very poor history of bringing in farm bill dollars that are designed for this sort of thing, and in part because there are few opportunities for it's called stateside matching dollars, and OHP has proposed to do that, to bring in a lot more of the federal farm bill dollars specifically. But the intersection with infrastructure and our granting program, I just think the opportunities are fantastic, so it's great to see. Today's anniversary also reminds me, Sunday, I have it on my calendar, is the Water Code anniversary, right? 1909.
Oh.
I think we need to adjourn. double cake. So I was a part of the OHP development through the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. And there's also a group now that's spun off from that, exploring the potential for a statewide Oregon Agricultural Trust that would really focus on protection of agricultural lands for food and fiber production as well as fish and wildlife. So if you would like to know more about any of those efforts, I'll bring that to the table. But
Is that designed to work in tandem with this program, or would it be kind of
much bigger?
Bigger and
It would be something that it could tap into. But if Commissioner Korn, as an agricultural landowner, looks around for help protecting farmland as farmland, not because it has spectacular wildlife benefits, but just because the encroachment, I was reading in the Capitol Press today about there's a bill looking to unwind some of the state land use laws for housing. And I know that the creep, especially in near urban areas, into farmlands, putting a tremendous amount of pressure on some of our most productive farm soils. And there aren't too many alternatives from a funding or conservation easement perspective specific to farm soil, for example. In Oregon, this is one exploration to see if that might be addressable, an organization that would be dedicated to helping with that. In the exploration phase now, but it's hard to overstate, quite frankly, how what a milestone it is to have the Oregon Farm Bureau and the network of watershed councils and the Coalition of Land Trusts and others come together and bring something forward. It's a tremendous step forward for this state. Really, really exciting.
All right, and before I close, I should add, Cindy, I heard a rumor last night that we will see you in June. Is that right?
It's on the
Jen is
record.
shaking her head, yes. So, no goodbyes, just thanks to both of you. Okay, so. Right. So next agenda item is the director's report.
Thank you, Chair Reeves. I'm not going to go into the details of the items that you have here. I'm going to go off script a little bit. First of all, I want to talk about water infrastructure. You've heard me talk in past meetings about the Oregon vision around water infrastructure, kind of a grand idea around the building awareness and interest among Oregonians, policymakers broadly, about the real need to invest at the state level in built and natural water infrastructure. And I wanted to just update you on some things that are happening around that. There have been conversations happening at the state level. There have been a state team that we're a part of that have been over previous months working on kind of building the baseline so that, that we understand what we have today and are able to articulate what the current state of affairs is with respect to infrastructure. And we're working with this broader stakeholder community to expand on that. That's an important first step. We're also recognizing that the scope and scale of what we're looking to build is something that's far beyond the state, and that we need an array of partners to work on this. And that, so really we're at the point now where we're trying to build a better project management structure for moving this forward. And so we're spending less time talking to folks and promoting the idea, and more time thinking about how does this move forward in a smart way. All that said, there's still, I think, great interest. Again, the idea is to really bring this, make it as universal as possible, knowing that there are all different types of interests around water infrastructure. You know, our interests tend to be more along the lines of some of the built infrastructure, the irrigation delivery systems, the dams, but there are also other structures like tide gates and levees. There are the natural infrastructure elements that are really important in terms of source water and other really important values that relate to water and the different delivery systems that exist in nature and are human-made. The state right now is very balkanized in terms of how we look at that, and oftentimes the different interests are competing against each other over relatively small pots of money. We're trying to build a better awareness and within maybe a few years call the question about whether there should be a larger state investment. So that's all still very much in early stages, still a lot to do there, but I'm excited about it. And I think it's the right questions and issues to be working with today, given the need that we know that we have. Related to that, Oregon and my position, I'm a member of the Western States Water Council, which is an association of 18 or 20 Western states, all who share some form of the prior appropriation doctrine, and we meet on a quarterly basis. I sit on the Water Resources Committee, or subcommittee of that group, and one of the big emphases that we're making this year is around infrastructure. And within the next month or so, Deputy Director Woodcock is going to be attending a meeting down in Arizona where it's going to be a workshop around infrastructure, and it's going to be a great opportunity for the state of Oregon, I believe, because it's going to be an opportunity to hear, kind of get a briefing from all the different states in terms of what they do around investment in infrastructure. And we're hoping that we can learn from folks. We feel like we're not as far along as many states in this area, and are eager to hear about their experiences, how they, whether they have resources at the state level for this type of investment, and what the sources of those revenues are. So we'll report out on that as we hear more, but I wanted to put that on your radar screen, and there'll be more conversations within the Western States Water Council community over the course of the year around those issues.
Tom,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but could I request that actually becomes an agenda item for the June meeting, a report on that? I think that would be rich. So I have to make a motion to do that and get it second. Anyway, one vote for,
Yeah, we can look into that, whether maybe a director's report or an individual item.
Great.
We'll kind of assess that based on the meeting itself.
Thank you.
I appreciate, yes.
Also, in terms of the infrastructure, do we have it's a big task. Do we have just a general idea of what the total financial issue is? I'm kind of going back to what Joe's saying, how you look at all the dams, you look at all the infrastructure you were just listing. Have we got estimates on how much it would take to bring them up to repair status?
No, I guess is the short answer. But the longer answer is we're working toward that, and there are many ways you can go after that, and how detailed that assessment is varies. But I can give you some sense of the enormity of the need. A few years ago, the League of Oregon Cities did a survey with municipalities on their wastewater systems and water supply system needs over the next 20 years. And for those who have participated in that, and these aren't all of the communities in the state, I'll give you that caveat, The need was described as, I think, $7.5 billion. That's just one element of the infrastructure needs, and I think it's eye-popping to me, and it makes me think about how the issues that we're wrestling with when we talk about infrastructure are really on the scale of transportation infrastructure investments. They won't be needed as often, but the scale right now, given that a lot of this infrastructure is aging and in need of updates or expansion or modification, it's a significant issue for communities around the state.
Yeah, I haven't commented on it before, but the Waihe's going through it's about a 2-year comprehensive program where we have a firm out of Hood River, sponsored by Bonneville, that's doing a comprehensive study of the Waihe project, looking at all aspects of potential hydro development, potential piping of canals, water savings, and we're going to have a document, probably in another year, for that specific project that will show potential as well as needs that then we will use for a guide to go for the very thing that you're talking about. And I know there's been I think Hood River's irrigation has already been through this process and has that document. And they're going to various areas in the state. And yeah, the needs are huge, but there is things being done on individual small basis. So we're shovel ready, so to speak, as these federal dollars, so we're looking at through Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley to become available in conjunction with the state. And so that document's going to be available for our little area here probably within a year, and they're moving along very well with that.
So that makes me think about Farmers Conservation Alliance, which is an entity that is working with a lot of irrigation districts to develop kind of the game plan on how they can modernize their systems. And it might be good at a future meeting to bring them in to talk about what they're doing. It's really impressive. And
What's the
they
name?
are
Sorry, what's
Farmers Conservation Alliance. And they are, they're working, I think, with roughly 18 districts currently. The demand for their services is growing. I think the work that we've been seeing in the Deschutes Basin and the Hood River Basin historically around piping ditches and improving systems is starting to catch on. And we are fortunate to have a congressional delegation that is tuned in and is starting to bring federal dollars. That's creating a bit of an issue for the state in terms of do we have the ability to be able to match some of those dollars? And those are real-time issues for some of the projects in Central Oregon right now that are pending.
Tom, that's an Oregon organization, the Farmers Conservation Alliance?
It is, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bonneville is part of the funding source on ours, I believe. I was just texting our
It may be,
managers.
and I know the Energy Trust of Oregon has also been a partner in supporting their efforts because there are some potential for in-conduit hydro through some of those projects. So there are efforts underway, and there are entities that are doing great work. It's big and sprawling, though, and just because of all the variety of different types of infrastructure and the interests associated with them. And in Oregon, the infrastructure is not owned by the state. Generally, it can be private, it can be local government. There's a wide variety of interests out there, which I think just adds to the complexity of the challenge ahead. Speaking of complexity and challenges ahead, I appreciate the feedback from commissioners on the discussion yesterday. These are complex issues. They are, I believe, wicked problems. And there's more ahead. I just want to put on your radar screen, and I'm not going to dive too deeply on any of these, but one of the things that I was thinking about during the conversation yesterday was the fact that we have these statewide rules around groundwater, surface water, conjunctive management, and we have a basin where we have very specific information about how the hydrology, both in surface water, groundwater, hydraulic connection. And I think it has raised a lot of conversation with staff about what's the appropriate way to manage the resource statewide versus more management regimes that are tailored to the specific facts on the ground for those basins. And I think those are issues we're going to be wrestling with more and more as we look at issues around the state. The Willamette Basin, unique with its 13 federal reservoirs. We have a lot of work ahead of us going into next biennium around implementation issues associated with the reallocation of the storage behind those reservoirs. Those are incredibly complicated issues and a potentially significant workload for staff in conjunction with our key stakeholders. The Deschutes Basin, we talk about a lot, but the issues there are also present for us with respect to do we have the tools and mechanisms to be able to get water to where it needs to be to meet the needs of today. And folks are working hard to take action, and we're going to be, I think, presented with some interesting challenges as we go forward to make sure that we have the toolkit available for that community to help them meet their needs over time. I think the groundwater mitigation program is another area where it's probably we're going to be needing to take a fresh look at its status and how we're moving forward with that. Klamath goes without saying in terms of being a big issue, but the other piece that I would put on the table is the Walla Walla Basin, which is an area of growing interest. We've been working with the Umatilla tribes as well as the state of Washington and are really teeing up, I'm very excited about it, an opportunity for those three sovereigns to engage with the Walla Walla Basin water user community on looking at a long-term kind of holistic approach for water management in that area. Going to be tough, obviously, because you've got a border cutting through the middle of that area, but there's, I think, a real sincere interest among the three entities to try to find an approach that can help that community wrestle with the scarcity issues that it's facing today and the needs for us to be able to address a wide variety of needs. So all that said, just there's more work than it's difficult to wrap my head around the amount of work that we have ahead of us. But I wanted to kind of give you some sense of some of the scale of some of the issues that we have going forward, because I think it is akin to some of the discussion that we had yesterday, both in the Harney and in the Klamath. They're going to be very complicated issues and are going to raise a lot of policy questions, I think, as we wrestle with those. Thank you, Commissioner Mull, for mentioning the Water Code birthday, 110. I was going to mention it the other day, but I was thinking about it the other day to mention it, but I guess when you're 110, things kind of, you don't retain as much. I wanted to see, we've talked a bit about water issues. We do have Ken Starr here today, and if you would like, he is willing to come up and talk about kind of the status of water issues. We've already talked about it a little bit, but would you like him to come up and, come on up, Ken.
Popular this morning. Thank you, Director Weiler. So I took the liberty of kind of updating a presentation I did earlier in the week, and if you wouldn't mind, I'll just pass it around. I think what I'd like to do is just dance through just a couple of these and not take up a lot of your time. Commissioner Korn already mentioned the improvement, and let me just go on record. This is Ken Starr. Thank you.
For the record, Ken, you did say you were going to dance. So.
Seriously? Did I say? Well, it's figuratively speaking, Commissioner. So let me just draw your attention to the first page. I updated this morning, so this is from yesterday. We went from Tuesday when I wrote this presentation, we were at 97% for the statewide snowpack, and as of yesterday, we were at 99%. So, Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Korn. Good job. Good work,
Ken. Keep it up.
Keep it up.
So, but you know, I kind of want us to pull back and maintain perspective, and that this is good news. But all through this beginning of the season, we've said, yeah, things don't look good, but let's not worry too much. A lot can happen, but I'm going to say the same thing now about the conditions being so good. We've seen this before where we have a sudden uptick, everything looks good, and then in 2 weeks it's all gone. So the long-term outlook continues to be warm and dry, although the short-term outlook continues to be colder than normal. So that's good short-term news for the condition of the snowpack. But we just need to kind of maintain that, what can I call it, fiscal awareness of this in the bank, and that we don't just go crazy and think we're going to spend it all. We just need to have that consciousness of conservation, actually. So let me get off of that soapbox real quick. Go to the next page, the February 19th plots. I find these fascinating. These are a new product that the Snow Survey is starting to roll out. They're not quite ready for prime time, but they are on their website. And this is just a sampling that I provided of some of the basins across the top that are a little bit short still. So you can see the Willamette and Rogue and Umpqua are still below normal. The little dot is their showing that that's where their mean peak of the season usually is. And we're, as you can see, we're getting close to that. And then across the bottom are the basins that are doing rather well this year. Good. I'm going to let it sink in for just a second. We'll jump into snowtail precipitation. And it's actually lagging just a little bit statewide. In general, east side of the state is well over 100%, but central Oregon and western Oregon is in the low 80%. And the rest of the presentation covers things like precipitation, temperature, for example, 2 more pages forward. December temperature was about normal. January temperature was ridiculously warm. February now is trending 5 to 10 degrees cooler than normal. So that's kind of what got us here. A little change in the weather pattern, cooler than normal weather, all really good for the short-term outlook. But as you move forward, jump forward again a couple of pages, the March, April, May outlook is back to that warm and dry trend. The rest of it is just a lot of graphs with lines that go up and down. So I'll let you just go ahead and take this home, food for thought. You can see, especially from some of the hydrographs, and part of my caution about saying, happy days are here again, snow is back, we've got a sponge out there that's been dry for a number of years. So we still have to make up that deficit before we can actually say, here it is, it's available for everything and everyone. So Colorado's having the same discussion where they had years and years of shortages, and then they've got a good snowpack this year. So their climatologists, their water supply people are saying, hang on, we really haven't replenished the aquifers. We haven't filled up the bucket yet. So this is all good news. And we like to call it in the Water Supply Availability Committee, this is relief. And not quite a everything's going to be okay kind of thing. So, and that's all I've got this morning.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, any questions before I say goodbye? Okay.
Thanks.
Ready to move on.
Okay. Oh, we're right on time, too. So next item is the legislative update. Raquel?
Good morning, For the record, Raquel Rancière, Senior Policy Coordinator with the Oregon Water Resources Department. Today we're going to be talking about the 2019 legislative session. As you may have seen, it has been a pretty busy session for us this year. I understand that you haven't been able to view the Excel spreadsheets that I've sent you, so we will do PDFs in the future so you can get those. So today I'm going to provide a brief overview of the session timelines as well as the committees that we're working with, and then we'll do a reminder of the department's bills, which we've talked about several times prior to session, and then we'll do a brief overview of some of the other water bills that have been put forward this session. I'll note this page, if you're looking for items on the legislative session, this is the Oregon Legislature's website, and it's a really handy tool. You can kind of see on the screen up there, it's clearer on mine, that up in the right-hand corner, that there's a tab there for session, bills, committees, and then more. And in that tab, you can click on bills, for example, type in the bill number, and easily be able to find and review the materials, amendments, and all the details around a bill. So if you're curious about any of the ones that I briefly touch on today, you can take a look at those online at a later date. And so it's OregonLegislature.com, and then if you click on the icon that says OLIS, that's really where you want to go, and that gives you access to all this information. You can also take a look at committees and committee membership. I didn't list those in full on the screen today, in part because we're working with so many committees this session, but you can certainly find those online as well. So in terms of legislative timelines, here's some of the key dates. The first, January 22nd is when session started, so we've already been in session for, I've lost track of my time, I guess a month now. So it seems like it's been several months, but we're only a month in. So the next deadline that is really key is March 29th, and that's the deadline for members or for committees to post bills for work sessions. So they have to provide that notice that they're going to schedule a bill. So that's the first day that a lot of bills die in committee. The next day a lot of bills die in committee is the first chamber deadline. So as you all know, the legislature operates with two separate branches. So the first chamber is the first chamber that the bill has been introduced in. So Senate bills are introduced in the Senate, House bills are introduced in the House, and they need to be out of if they're in a policy committee, they need to be out of that committee by April 9th. There's exceptions to this rule. The Rules Committee, Revenue, Joint Ways and Means Committees, they don't have these deadlines that apply to them. May 10th is the second deadline, so this is again for policy committees to get out of bills out of second chamber. This is the deadline to post work sessions for that, and May 24th is the deadline for those to make it out of committee. And then finally, the legislature likes to set goals, and so their goal to be out of session is actually June 21st. However, constitutionally, they're required to be out by June 30th. So we'll see what their final sine die date is. Committees. We're working with a lot of committees this session. There's the House Natural Resources Committee that's chaired by Representative Witt. And this one is getting a couple bills on water-related issues, primarily well construction and dam safety. There's the House Energy and Environment Committee. This has most of the bills this session. Representative Helm, who's the chair of that committee, has introduced a number of them. And then there's House Agriculture and Land Use. And this committee has received, I think, one or two water bills this session, ones that Representative Clem had introduced and relate to Columbia River water. So, and Representative Clem is the chair of that committee. On the Senate side, there's one committee. It's Senate Environment and Natural Resources, which is chaired by Senator Dembro. They're getting all the water bills so far on the Senate side, although there's not very many. And then there's Joint Ways and Means. We typically work with the Natural Resources Subcommittee on our budget, and then there's the Capital Construction Committee that works on bonding. And finally, there's another committee we're somewhat watching this session. They've been doing a lot of work, actually, so we haven't seen all of their hearings to date. But this is the Joint Carbon Reduction Committee. So this, if you're hearing anything about the carbon bill, that bill is being worked through this committee. So we're monitoring that one. And the carbon bill, which I don't think I've mentioned in other slides, so far has a slight nexus to water issues in that it provides potential funding for water projects. We're still evaluating that bill. It's a really long one. So moving into Water Resources Department legislation, as a reminder, we have 3 legislative concepts. There's, or I guess it's no longer legislative concepts, they're actually bills now. House Bill 2084, this is the place-based planning bill that extends the sunset on place-based planning to 2023. And this bill is already moving, so it's actually in the second chamber now, awaiting assignment to a committee. It passed through the House Energy and Environment Committee and to the floor, and we had 3 no votes, and so we did pretty good on that bill. Water bills are always, it's great when you get most people voting yes on them, so we were pretty pleased to see that. Then there's House Bill 2085. This is our modernization of the dam safety statutes. This bill is scheduled for a March 5th hearing with, this one's in House Ag and Land Use, or no, sorry, House Natural Resources. And so this one will be scheduled for a hearing on Tuesday, March 5th. We are working on amendments on this bill as well. So there's some items that we've noted, and then we're also getting feedback from some stakeholders about amendments that they would like to see to that bill. Finally, there's Senate Bill 51. This is our most contentious bill of the session. We had a hearing on it in the first week, actually, of session. And this one relates to the issue the transfers and the stored water. This one specifically addresses a narrow part of that issue, which is allowing the department to do transfers in the character or type of use. Some folks call it purpose of use. So, for example, changing it from irrigation to municipal, that would be a change in the type of water that you're storing. This bill, there was opposition to it, so many of the water user groups came in opposition to it, and some of the conservation groups came in support of it, and that basically the opposition was making the argument that they would like a comprehensive fix to it and not a piecemeal approach, as our bill does. So House Bill 50, well, so I should stop for a second on that. I know that there is some folks that are working on trying to find a comprehensive solution to it. I haven't seen where that one will go, but there is certainly discussion. So that one's we don't know exactly what will happen on that bill this session. And then there's House Bill 5043, which is our budget bill. That's scheduled for a hearing on March 4th through 6th. And then there's the bonding bill. This is a statewide bill, and that's the one that contains our lottery bond funding proposals.
Question about 51.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a capsule version of what the opposition wants to see covered in a bill like this? I don't want to,
Yes.
we don't have a lot of detail, but I'm just curious what their world of changes would look like.
Yes, Chair Reeves. So our bill currently only addresses changes in the type of stored water. It does not address changes in points of diversion or where the water is stored, and they would like all of those included. So on typical transfer statutes, we have authority to do all of those types of changes. We initially did not propose those in this bill, in part because when we were working on the bill back in March, there didn't seem to be broad consensus on what to do, except that everyone seemed to agree we needed that. So that's the reason that they're opposing it, is they want a comprehensive fix.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, there's a ton of other bills that we're tracking this session, and they range from statewide bills to natural resource bills that could have some potential water resources nexus if they were amended. But in general, I'm not going to go over most of those types of bills, other than to note there's a lot of statewide bills this session that affect state government, everything from procurement practices to public records to PEB, so the public employee, or PERS, I should say, the public employee retirement system. So there's many bills out there on that, and the Department of Administrative Services is the point on those bills, although we monitor them. So the next set of bills here are, the next three slides are water bills specifically. And there's a couple that have a little bit of a nexus to water, but I'll point them out for particular reasons. So the first two bills that are on the screen, these ones pertain to water use reporting. These bills were brought forward by House Energy and Environment. Representative Helm had a work group, and he'd had a series of bills in 2017. And so he's actually running both bills right now for a public hearing. And I don't know which one he intends to move forward. One would create a task force on studying essentially measurement and reporting. The other one would allow the department to require a water user to report water use if we were requiring them to measure it. So today, we only have the authority to require them to measure their water use if they don't already have a condition on their permit, if they're not a governmental entity, or if they're not in a serious water management problem area. We don't have the authority typically to require them to report that water use. So this would allow the department to do that. The next bill would provide funding for groundwater studies. I don't think I need to explain that one in much more detail. Senate Bill 791. This one relates to a topic that you heard a lot about yesterday. This bill was introduced by a number of legislators, the primary sponsor being Senator Linthicum. And so this bill is specific to some of the issues we're seeing come out of the Klamath Basin relating to groundwater surface water regulation. However, it is a statewide bill that would essentially identify when the department could, or establish the criteria for when the department could regulate groundwater and for surface water rates. House Bill 2331, this one limits the time that the department can enforce our standards for well construction. So essentially, it, in its current form, would prohibit the department from enforcing well construction standards 3 years after the well was drilled, or if it was drilled prior to the statute being passed, 6 years. So this one was introduced by the Oregon Groundwater Association, and we've been, that's where I was yesterday actually, speaking with them for several hours about this bill, and so we're continuing to have conversations with them about that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So in that case, they're trying to limit the time. Is that because we're not able to get in and inspect them once they submit their completed plans? Is that the and understand the background on that.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner. Yes, so today, there is no limits on the time that we can go back and require them to repair a well. So their argument is that sometimes we come back 30 years later and we hold the driller liable for addressing the well construction issues for that well. Certainly, we understand their concerns on that. At the same time, if that well is creating a problem for the resource, so commingling, contamination, that is impact on other entities, not just the one well owner, but it does have a public resource issue there. So there is, I think, a balancing act that needs to be struck, and we're continuing to speak with them about that. I think they're trying to, they would like to see us review well logs, all well logs as they come in as an initial step. And so that's their request, and we're continuing to have conversations about that. Okay, the next one, House Bill 2853, this one was also where I was at yesterday, so there was a public hearing on this bill. This bill addresses a particular issue that has come up in the Big Butte Creek watershed. There's individual homeowners that purchased a property with a pond on it, and the county had that pond on their records. At some point after they purchased the property, they had contacted the water master to find out that they didn't actually have water rights, and that the reservoir is illegally storing water. So this proposes, if you know some of the history around this Big Butte Creek watershed, it is a watershed that is listed in ORS Chapter 538, which means that the legislature withdrew it from further appropriation. And so there's a number of areas in the state where the legislature did this in Chapter 538, and this bill would allow the department to register ponds or reservoirs that were established, I think it's prior to January of 2000. Don't quote me on that one, but that's my recollection. So they could, it's essentially kind of a grandfathering program. And this grandfathering program is similar to some of the ones that we had done in the 90s. Some of you may recall there was 2 sets of ponds grandfathering legislation, which then resulted in a long-term fix in our alternate reservoir process that was established for these reservoirs that were not statutory dams. The one issue that they've brought up, though, is that they can't go through the alternate reservoir process if you're in a withdrawal area. So this bill is specific to withdrawal areas. The next one is House Bill 2819. This one was introduced by the Northeast Oregon Water Association, and it's being amended right now. There was a work group to work on what they're calling basalt stabilization, or a basalt bank type model over in the critical groundwater areas in the Umatilla Basin, and this is tied to what you've probably heard about in the director's reports, the Northeast Oregon Water Association and their surface water diversions from the Columbia. So this bill is seeking to, I think as it'll be amended, it will provide money to pay landowners that are within the critical groundwater area that are receiving groundwater allocations. It will allow, I think it's a $1 million grant per year, to pay those landowners the differential cost of pumping. And so surface water costs more to pump than groundwater. So this would pay them that differential pumping cost to incentivize them to obtain the surface water from the Columbia River and move off of the basalt groundwater that's in these critical areas. So that's one piece of the bill. The second part of it is that they're seeking to ensure that if a landowner participates in this pilot, that during that time period, their groundwater rights wouldn't be subject to forfeiture. So that's the short, we could talk about this one longer, but that's the short summary of what their bill, I think, is seeking to do. There's more details about the goals that they're working towards in a work group letter that our department and several other folks had participated on.
Raquel, a question about that. Do people who would use this program already have surface water rights out of the Columbia that they're not using?
Chair Reeves, so this would be a new program, so it would be a pilot. And as you know, they've been working on new projects to pull water out of the Columbia. So we've been issuing water right permits on those. And the key, I think, is that the land does need to have a surface water right. So this doesn't just establish a surface water right like some other bills that were introduced this session, or that are, it's unclear what the other bills would do, I guess is a better way to say it. So I think they're trying to get at existing rights. There's been a lot of discussion on that specific question. But from our standpoint, obviously, they would need to have a legal surface water source for that property.
Okay, thank you. John, any more?
I was just curious, the source, the source of the money?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Moll, I think it's general fund is my recollection. Okay, the next bill is Senate Bill 511. This one was introduced by Senator Bentz, and essentially it would provide funding for doing groundwater studies within the Harney Basin, as well as providing incentives for water conservation projects. So trying to see if I have a quick summary. No, I don't. Oh, I think I skipped ahead on all of you, didn't I? So 2581, I'll go back to that one real quick. This one, my understanding is this bill won't be moving forward. So this one was introduced, and it would essentially make findings that require the department to take all actions necessary to develop water out of the Columbia River. And but the latest information that I have is that this bill won't be moving forward. Okay, and then jumping back to Senate Bill 700.
Raquel, could
Yes.
I go back to Senate Bill 511? If that were, when it says funding for these studies, does that include funding for the department as well to work on those studies, or any measured impact on the department if those were approved?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, my understanding is the bill that was introduced would need to be amended. And so the way the bill is currently written, the money would go to Harney County. My understanding is that is not necessarily the intent of the sponsor. Okay, and Chair Reeves and Commissioner, sorry, I was trying to see if I had a note on if it was lottery bonding or general fund, and I don't have that. My recollection is it's general fund, but I'm not certain, so. Okay, moving on to Senate Bill 700. This one is also, my understanding, is being amended. I haven't seen the amendments. My understanding is that the introduced version doesn't accomplish what the proponents are looking for. At a high level, I think what they're trying to do is establish a program that would allow certain water districts to, or water suppliers to collect a surcharge on the water that they provide, and turn that around and provide that surcharge to a nonprofit that could invest that money into developing mitigation credits. My understanding is their interest is in doing this both for stream flow, but that they may also be interested in doing this for other types of benefits to the stream. So this would be a significant change to the way that the Scenic Waterways Act, which is currently, really the reason we have a Deschutes groundwater mitigation program, because currently that is focused on stream flows. So, like I said, we haven't seen a new version, and so we'll see. Maybe that has changed since the last time I had heard from them when they were formulating their ideas. But I think that's where they were looking at going. Okay, House Bill 2672. This bill is up for a hearing on Monday. This bill is one of the semi-related water bills, and that doesn't address water rights, but it does establish authority for us to be reimbursed for our work and time spent on cannabis-related issues. So another, I think it's DEQ and I think ODA are also listed in the bill as other entities. So far, I've been hearing that people that have been advocating for this bill is Oregon Farm Bureau, as well as I think the Oregon League of Women Voters. So that's what I've been hearing on that bill so far. There's a couple other bills that I'll mention briefly, given the time. There's two bills that are scheduled that are basically legislative support for pump storage projects, specifically one, the Swan Lake one down in the Klamath Basin. There's Senate Bill 103 and 104. I don't know that these ones are going to move forward, but they're more just a note that there is an interest by Senator Dembro to address some of the issues that have arisen in regards to a dairy in Northeast Oregon. And so one of those issues is around using exempt groundwater in a critical groundwater area. He has a work group scheduled on this, and I understand he's going to be introducing two bills on this item. So I don't think these ones are the vehicle that he's looking at. Senate Bill 347 and House Bill 2917. These bills I've seen in several prior sessions, and essentially it would exempt diffuse surface water from the need to obtain a water rate. And then the final set of bills that I'll note is this session we've seen a trend towards on particular residential dwelling or other land use related bills that involve development in areas that may have exempt wells, an interest in putting language in the bills that would not allow that development if it's within a critical groundwater area, for example. There've been a bunch of different proposals, so it's more just to note that that's one theme that we have seen this session. And with that, I think that is all the bills that we're going to cover today. Any questions?
Just one quick, are you going to ask one, Joe?
I was going to move that we get a PET scan of her brain so that we can replicate it to track all of this.
I'll second that.
Well, thank you.
I noticed you have some budget numbers tied in your staff report. Are we going to hear about that during the next portion, or in your staff report, you correlated some of those budget numbers in there?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, that's a great question. Let me look and see what I put in here. Is that in the budget update presentation?
Well, no, it's in your agency, well, it is, but I'm seeing this as part of your legislative update. So that's why I'm asking if that translates back into the, if I'm on the right one.
I'm
Yeah,
not
this
sure I
is
see.
the legislative update, section 3. Well, I must have a different copy, so I'll just wait till the budget update.
Okay. Chair Reeves, Commissioner, the short answer is yes, we are going to talk about budget in the one that Lisa's going to be joining me for.
No more questions? Let's do the budget.
Yeah, you just
Let's see.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Lisa Snyder. I'm the ASD Administrator, and I'm here to give you the budget update for the 1921 Governor's Recommended Budget. And hopefully Raquel will help me out every once in a while when I need it. Thank you. Hang on, I wanted to talk about the cover slide. The cover slide here is a view that I woke up to about a year ago, keeping the snow theme here. So very pretty. End of February, I think, end of February, beginning of March. So there's still time. Thank you. Okay, for today's presentation, I hope to cover three main topics for the governor's budget. The budget environment as we're developing the budget, as well as a summary of the governor's budget, and the next steps in the process. So, backing up, Lisa. The economy nowadays remains very strong. Our revenues are really good. The problem that we're seeing, though, is the costs for our services have been increasing and outpacing the revenues that we're receiving, resulting in a budget cut, or a budget gap, excuse me. In order to balance the budget and invest in key priority areas, you have to move money around in order to do that. Shift resources, which means puts and takes for agency budgets, as well, for agency budgets. WRD's governor's budget does take both pluses and minuses in our budget. So in your packet, you've received the governor's recommended budgets summary in attachment 1, and I'll be following along this to provide you the update. I also wanted to give a shout out to our new WRD website and the legislative and budget page. So the summary document provides high-level information. If you want detailed information, the website page here has our complete agency request budget document as well as our governor's recommended budget document. Also contains the summary, and if you're only interested in the policy option packages, there's a pull-out separate, so you don't have to go through 1,000 pages of reports. Okay. So this is the traditional comparison slide for the 2017-19 legislatively approved budget as of the February session as compared to the governor's recommended budget. Overall for the agency, there's a net gain of about $3 million in total fund and 14 positions. The next two slides are going to show these figures in a bar chart, which makes it a lot easier to see that. So this chart is the total budget by fund type. Along the left side of the screen there is the dollars in millions, and the bottom of the screen there is the fund type of our budget. The blue bars are the 1719 LAB, and the 1921 governor's budget are the green bars. You'll notice on the general fund, we go from 32 to 39 million in this budget. Other funds and federal funds are relatively flat. The lottery funds, the increase there is debt service for the grants and loans programs. And on the grants and loans program, the green bar, which is the 1921 GRB, that contains the 15 million that we received in Policy Option Package 107 for the grant and loan program, as well as the carryover funding from this biennium, because the bonds don't get sold until the end of the biennium.
So what was the drop in federal funds? Is that a program that ended or something?
Chair Reeves, no, it's not a program that ended. The drop in federal funds is actually, the drop in federal funds for 1921 is what we would consider a cleanup of excess limitation. So we had in 1719 LAB, we had about 1.8 million in what we call limitation, so the availability to spend federal funds. We don't have that much revenue that comes in, so this was an attempt to bring our limitation closer to our actual revenue.
The actual revenue.
Mhm.
Okay.
This slide is our operating budget by fund, and when we say operating budget by fund, we pull out anything that's related to the lottery bond funding, so the debt service as well as the grant and loans. So kind of a cleaner, smaller picture of the last slide there. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and transition to the adds to the budget, the policy option packages. And the first slide will be taken by Raquel.
Chair Reeves, Commissioners, for the record, Raquel Rancier, Senior Policy Coordinator with the Department. And so today, I'm going to go briefly over the first set of budget packages and then hand it back over to Lisa. The first package is 101. This is our place-based planning related package. So this one would propose to provide funding to continue to provide grants to the place-based planning areas. So there's 4 that we've been working with, and this would provide funding to continue working with them, as well as to do an evaluation of the place-based approach to water planning. As a reminder, there's many ways to do water planning. Place-based planning is one approach, and so we want to evaluate that after we've had several of the areas that are piloting it complete their work. The other part of this package is continuing to extend, actually hopefully make permanent, currently proposes to make it permanent, a limited duration position that has been working on this, so that's a planning coordinator position. The second package is 102. This one is really a data package that is providing us with additional resources to allow us to be able to complete an additional groundwater study. To do that, it includes positions that are hydrogeologists, so that's what you would traditionally associate with a groundwater study package. But one of the areas where we've identified is needing resources in order to do a basin study is also in our surface water section. So a groundwater study does include both surface water and groundwater data in order to be able to understand the entire water budget for that basin. So there's several positions in here that are also related to surface water. There's also a position in here that is related to well construction. So this we've been in our conversations, this one may change over time. It's currently proposed as a Columbia River Basin well construction specialist, but that may shift more towards well log reviews as we have more conversations with the Oregon Groundwater Association. It also provides a facilitation and policy position. One of the things that we've learned over time in doing these groundwater basin studies is that we need not only the technical staff, but we also need the policy staff that are thinking about how you facilitate meetings with the communities. We like the Harney model that we've been doing, where we've actually had a groundwater study advisory committee with individuals from the basin that have been step-by-step reviewing the scientists and really working with our groundwater scientists. If you ever get the chance to go to one of those meetings, it's really great to watch. And so we think we need to have that kind of a policy position that's thinking about that public outreach. I'll move in now to package 10. Yes.
What's great about it?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner. So I think under the old model, we would do the science, we would come out with a report, and we would say, here, community, here's this report, right? And under the Harney approach, which recall this was included in the rules that we adopted when we classified the basin for exempt uses only, is that we set up a groundwater study advisory committee. So it has people from the basin that we have regularly scheduled meetings, and what you see is they're engaged, they're participating, they're understanding it. They're asking much more technical questions than I know how to ask because they've been getting the information from our scientists. So you'll see several of the hydrogeologists there and presenting the information that they've collected, people asking very engaged questions. And so from our standpoint, we're developing a little mini group of local people that understand the science and can articulate it. And if they have uncertainty about it, they can provide that feedback to our scientists, and we can work to try to address that. So that's why we see it as a benefit, is that kind of engagement and hopefully support of the science in the future.
Sorry, forgive my ignorance, but is that the only place we're doing that approach at this point?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, so we're only doing one groundwater study right now. So in terms of groundwater studies, yes. I think that you could say that if we talk more about a lot of the complex water issues we're working on, we certainly have folks in all those basins. But this is the one I would point to is the first time that we've taken this approach on a groundwater study.
If I could add, with the Walla Walla Basin is another area where we're working with groundwater users. It's not a study at this point, but we are spending a lot of time building relationships and awareness. And Raquel framed that really well. I would boil it down to the word trust, and what we heard the lack of yesterday around the Klamath issue. To us, it's having that trust in science is extremely important for us to be able to manage programs that rely on that science.
Thanks. So, thank you. Joe, you done?
Thank you.
So this is not just a short-term request, it's a long-term, so when we finish this basin, we can move to other basins. It's a great request.
Chair Reeves, Commissioners, so the answer, I nodded yes, so just for the record, yes, it is. And so going then into package 104, this one has two components in it. The first one is around dam safety, and so it essentially provide funding for us to do assessments of dams as well as do a task force on dam safety. And then, so that's on $500,000 for that, and then there's another $100,000 for a business case on investing in water infrastructure. And so this ties to probably what Director Byler has talked with all of you about in regards to the water infrastructure vision and being able to communicate. That's one of our biggest challenges, is being able to communicate the importance of water. So this provides funding to do that activity. Tom, did I cover everything on that? Okay.
You covered that well. There's also the fee element associated with that package.
Yes. And Chair Reeves, Commissioners, the other component to Package 104 is it includes fee revenue that's associated with House Bill 2085. That's our dam safety modernization bill. And as part of that bill, we have we're proposing to institute a fee for reviewing new dams and significant modifications to dams. and for reviewing those plans and specifications, which can take, on a high-hazard dam, it can take substantial amounts of time. So this is, because it's establishing a new fee, we actually have to have a policy option package associated with it, and so that fee revenue is also included in this. My recollection is it's under $50,000, so is our estimates.
Are you going to be adding more staff under this package then? Because it seems like that you're really limited on staff to be able to get around in a timely manner.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Korn, that is an area that we have flagged as a continuing need, is for dam safety. We did have a request for it in the agency request budget. It was not, though, included in the governor's recommended budget. So the current version of the package does not propose additional staff.
Package 105 is addressing increased legal expenses. The department has been seeing a dramatic increase in litigation over the past several biennia. So much so that in this biennium, I believe it was the May invoice, we had already exceeded our line item budget for litigation expenses, and went to the emergency board for a request to help us out, and luckily we're successful. This package would add $1 million to our base budget, which will help us next biennium on that. Package 106 is supporting water measurement in the field. This adds boots on the ground, to use Tom's terms, in key offices to help support timely water management and distribution. So there'd be 2 water masters, one in the Willamette and one in the Crooked River, and a regional assistant water master in the East region and in the South Central region. Package 107 is investing in projects to meet water needs, and this is our water project grants and loans package, and this adds $15 million in lottery revenue bonds for the department.
If I could pause just on package 105, the legal expenses issue. We put in a lot of time trying to educate legislators to help them understand the issue that we had. In prior biennia, we had to dive into our own resources to be able to make our budget balance. We were really concerned about that going forward. We didn't think that was a sustainable approach, and we are, I think, legitimately concerned that we're going to see these types of legal expenses continue over time. One of the interesting questions that I've had presented to me over at the Capitol on occasion is what are you going to do to try to limit those? And I find that to be a really difficult question to answer. And as you can appreciate, the decisions that we make can get attacked on from different angles, and so there's no easy answer to that. We certainly try to resolve a lot of the conflicts through negotiation and settlement, but even those have legal expenses attached to them. So it's really a conundrum for us, and I don't advertise that there are simple solutions to this. Rather, I think that as we find ourselves in increasing scarcity situations, I think the opportunity for conflict goes up. That said, maybe the one long-term antidote for this are things like place-based planning and these we were just talking about the groundwater issue, where we have these community-based groups that we bring along through these processes to increase their awareness and understanding. To me, those are probably the best down payments that we can make, but those also have a cost associated with them, and so there's no cheap way out of this, in my view.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
And then I was thinking that same thing, Tom. It just seems to me the investment now in the legal is because we didn't have those things in place before. And what I would envision is eventually we can shift that $1 million to investing for additional ground well monitoring and place-based planning as those issues settle out.
Tom, I assume there's no, when you're asked that question, there's no appetite for going back to the situation where the department was like every other state agency and didn't have orders in other than contested cases stayed by the filing of a lawsuit? Because my impression is that a lot of this cost is attributable to that specific provision.
Yeah, that issue has not been at the forefront at this point, and I think that's still a bridge to cross.
Like, it would create more problems than it would solve to try to address it. Because it's fair, I mean, the overall scheme of things, it's a fairly recent change, and it does put the department in a different position than literally every other state agency. And it's resulting in a lot of these costs. It seems like at least legislators knowing about it would make some sense.
My view is that this is an issue that is better taken up by the water user community than the department.
Right.
Package 112 is continuing payroll shared services. This package makes permanent an existing accounting tech or payroll technician in my area. We began a pilot back, I believe it was spring of 2016, where 5 agencies came together to determine some best practices and try to build some bench strength around payroll and benefits administration. And so far, actually, we're looking at dissolving the pilot at the end of June, but making it a permanent thing. We now have 6 agencies served by 2 payroll specialists and over 550 staff that they're servicing. Package 113 is supporting agency functions, and this one adds a full-time internal auditor to our staff. Back in the summer, there was an SOS, Secretary of State audit that recommended that agencies have auditors. And so the governor placed 13 or 14 auditors in state agencies to help them identify risks, strengthen their internal controls, and identify areas for improvements. The next slide is Package 90 proposed reductions. The first one is $497,000, and that's salaries, OPE, so staff, 3 positions, a water rights data tech, a water rights extension adjudication processor, and a field water right Oregon plan position. These would be the proposed reductions for what we call, I guess, special pots of money. This would reduce gauging station funds by $97,000, which would leave about $100K for, for maintenance and repair of gauging stations. Next one is a reduction of $100,000 in observation wells, which would leave about $270,000 for the maintenance and installation of observation wells around the state. The next one is reducing the general fund portion of the feasibility study grants by about half, so that leaves about $200K left for that. And the final one here is reducing water measurement cost share funds by $9,000. The last 2 reductions in Package 90 are $134,000 reduction to standard inflation, and then $724,000 is an increase to our vacancy savings target, which would mean that we will need to leave positions open probably 90 days to be able to meet these targets, vacant positions.
So if I can add, so all of these reductions are general fund, and most of our budget is general fund with respect to operations. On the vacancy piece, it does tie into the discussion we were just having around the litigation expenses. And so this current biennium, we had these vacancy savings target of a similar scale, I believe. And from a management standpoint, we're certainly concerned that when we have a vacancy occur, we've got a 3-month gap of lack of service that happens. If we have to dig deeper through covering our litigation expenses by digging into our own budget, those gaps can extend considerable periods of time, which then lead to, over time, that can really build and create some gaps in productivity within our different programs and divisions. So we are already starting probably with this 3-month delay, and we'll hopefully be able to address additional problems by getting that legal expenses need filled going forward. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here, Lisa, but when you overall, when you look at our budget and the adds and potential reductions in the governor's budget, we are very fortunate in terms of what the governor put forward, and it really shows a prioritization that the governor has made around water issues. We have a lot more adds than reductions that are on the table, at least for a conversation with the legislature. So we're pretty thrilled to be in that position going forward. Not all agencies have that luxury.
Mike?
Package.
Well, let her finish first.
Okay.
Package 91 proposed reduction is $257,000 in general fund, and this is an adjustment to our budget based on reductions that were taken in the Department of Administrative Services budget. So when we build the budget, Department of Administrative Services charges and DOJ charges get added to a certain level, and then when they go through this process and their budget gets adjusted, our budget gets in turn adjusted. So this would be for the Department of Administrative Services charges, and then the next one is for the DOJ rates of $57,000 general fund. So next steps in our budget, Ways and Means Subcommittee on Natural Resources on March 4th and 5th, with public testimony on March 6th. And then the final legislatively adopted budget in early summer.
We saw those pretty firm dates, you think?
Chair Reeves, Commissioners, they are tentative dates that are pretty firm. How's that?
Yes, the answer to your question.
1984. Thank you.
Chair Reeves, Commissioners, I say that because an agency did just have their budget hearing moved up a month, so. So they have told us this is the tentative list. I don't anticipate it changing. However, I did just hear 2 days ago that somebody's did get moved, so they're tentative but pretty firm.
All right. Oh, Mike.
Just a quick, I'm trying to track the positions from the previous, our goals. When we first talked about new positions and where I think you are now is, it looks like we had a gain of 15, but in the reduction of 4, so a total of 11 new positions, if I'm adding in the staff report correctly.
Under the governor's budget proposal?
Well, under your ad packages.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, if you take a look at the attachment, you can see the overall. So during the legislatively adopted budget, there was 170 positions. You can see next to that line, it has 167 FTE. So we don't always have the same, it's not always full-time positions is what that reflects. And then there's 184 positions and 177 FTE associated with the governor's recommended budget. So that would be a net increase of 14. One thing to keep in mind that is not reflected in these slides is that if there's a limited duration position, for example, that, gets reduced and it wouldn't be on these reduction slides. And so if the numbers don't add up, that's where you'd be seeing.
Yeah, I was just simply looking at each of the add and reduction packages, so, because you do a great job of showing the number of increases, and I know on the dam safety, we originally thought we'd go for 11.444, I think. I don't know how you get the .44, but, and so somewhere we must have adjusted that down, likely that the $234,000 funding shortage likely, but, so I was just trying to track how well, and the reason I'm asking the question is because we have a lot of work to do, and I think it's really important to get these positions. And I think it's great that you rearranged some of the general fund packaging to try to go for these new goals. I think it was a great, not just strategy, but a great way to manage the budget, I think so.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, if I'm looking at this handout and assuming that I'm counting correctly, it looks like there's 16 positions listed on this handout on the ads. And if you recall, one of those is continuing the payroll shared services LD and making that permanent, and the other one is making the existing place-based planning one. So that would be.
I'm showing 4 in your reduction package, I think. That's why I was trying to make sure I understood it. So you're showing reduction of 2 positions. And I don't mean to get into it, I apologize for that, but I'm trying to get the sense of it. So you added 15 or 16, I missed the one, and then minus 4 in your restructuring, is that right?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner, so if you look at the package 090, that has the position reductions in the governor's recommended budget. There's 3 positions technically on that list, but there's something that will need to be corrected, because there's actually, the intent was to take 2 positions, but there's funding for 3 positions that have been taken. So that's why it says 2 FTE on there, is because it was really, they took 2 positions, but accidentally took the funding for 3.
Okay. Thanks. And again, the only reason for my questions, I think this is important that we have the additional staff to be very successful with these proposed programs. So.
Thanks to both of you, and we're going to take a break now.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and it's a maybe somewhat rhetorical question, recommendation. So it looks like we have 0.8 tenths of, less than 1% of this budget comes from federal funding, and including a pretty significant reduction over the measly amounts previously. Is that that seems like a huge opportunity for change, but I don't know the mechanisms.
Yeah, I do. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because I do think that it's a kind of a gap in our attention and focus, and it is a missed opportunity. I don't know that we have the same nexus or opportunities that some other states do, where they have a much stronger federal water presence, where you can really tap into Corps and Bureau of Reclamation funding. But we do have some, and I don't think that I know that we don't spend as much time on that as I would like us to. It's purely a capacity issue for us, and we've had some conversations about how we can better focus on those opportunities, because I think there is some benefit that could be accrued from that. So that's on our minds, and I hope that we can start bumping that line item up over time.
Like Commissioner Baumgartner, I'll be in D.C. next week. We've talked briefly, just advocating for federal funding packages for land and water broadly, and I would encourage you to think creatively of ways to use the commissioners' connections and others assign stuff to us to help us understand better how we can help you with that. Because, we need to do better on that. Thanks.
Okay, we will reconvene at 10:15. With agenda item J, Lisa and Sarah, welcome. And let me just say before we get going that a reminder that anyone who would like to make public comment on this agenda item should fill out one of these yellow forms and give it to Cindy. or Jen? And I have one already, and so anyone else who would like to address the commission, please fill out a form. Thanks.
All right. Well, good morning, Chair Reeves and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Lisa Jaramillo, and I'm the manager of the Transfer and Conservation section.
Good morning, Chair Reeves and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Sarah Henderson, and I'm the Flow Restoration Program Coordinator.
I'm going to start by providing a short overview of the material we'll be presenting today. First, we'll discuss the purpose of a mitigation bank in the Deschutes Basin and the requirements for becoming a mitigation bank. We'll give you a brief history of the applications submitted to the department and the charters approved by the commission to date. We'll also discuss the mitigation bank application recently submitted by Arnold Irrigation District. And finally, we'll present some alternatives and ask the commission for action. As a quick bit of background, in September 2002, the Commission adopted the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Bank and Mitigation Credit Rules in Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 690, Division 521, which set forth the process to recognize and establish mitigation banks in the Deschutes Basin. The purpose of the mitigation bank is to facilitate the transactions among holders of the mitigation credits and the persons interested in acquiring mitigation credits. The mitigation credits are a means to fulfill a mitigation obligation for a Deschutes Basin water use permit issued under the Deschutes Basin groundwater mitigation rules outlined in Division 505. The Division 521 requirements for establishing a mitigation bank specify that any person may apply to become a recognized mitigation bank by submitting an application to the department using a form provided by the department. The applicant must enter into an agreement with the department by means of a mitigation bank charter that details the agreed-upon elements and obligations necessary to meet the provisions of Division 521. To move forward, the mitigation bank charter must be approved by the Water Resources Commission following public notice and an opportunity for public comment. The applicant must maintain an accounting system and track the assignment of all mitigation credits to and from the bank, categorized by zone of impact, and report to the department annually on all transactions and activities of the bank, as well as any other reporting requirements determined to be necessary by the department. And of course, they must abide by the Division 521 rules and the charter agreement.
Thank you, Lisa. Chair Reeves and Commissioners, for the record, I'm Sarah Henderson. Since the beginning of the program, there have been 5 mitigation bank charter applications submitted to the department. As you can see, MB2 and MB4 were withdrawn by the applicants before being brought to the Commission. In 2003, the Charter for Mitigation Bank 1 was developed by the department and Deschutes Water Exchange, now known as the Deschutes River Conservancy. Since then, this charter has worked very well and has become the model for all bank charters. Here are the first and last pages of the Charter for Mitigation Bank 1, which was approved by the Commission and signed by the bank representative and Director Paul Cleary in April 2003. As previously mentioned, the charter was amended in 2008 to change the name of the bank from Deschutes Water Exchange to Deschutes River Conservancy. And here's the charter for Mitigation Bank 3, which was approved by the Commission and signed by John Short for Deschutes Irrigation LLC and Director Phil Ward in May 2006. The reason we are here today is because Arnold Irrigation District submitted a mitigation bank application on September 18, 2018. The department assigned the application number MB5 and noticed it in the department's weekly public notice on October 9, 2018. No comments were received. The application provided the proposed bank operations and goals, and it meets all requirements necessary to become a mitigation bank as outlined in Division 521. The alternatives we're presenting to the Commission for consideration and action today are approve Arnold Irrigation District's proposed mitigation bank charter in the form of the draft charter in Attachment 1, and delegate responsibility for finalizing the charter to the director in Attachment 2. Number 2, approve Arnold Irrigation District's proposed mitigation bank charter in Attachment 1 with revisions, and delegate responsibility for finalizing the charter to the director in Attachment 2. Or number 3, not approve Arnold Irrigation District's proposed mitigation bank charter and request further evaluation by the department. The alternative and action we're recommending to the Commission is alternative number 1. Thank you for your time and consideration today, and at this time, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I have a broad question, just what we've learned, and comment, you're part of this too, but I'm just curious what over the last year, we've had some presentations and site visits to water districts and others, and in the Deschutes, quite a bit going on. I'm curious what's happening to the price of water, what these credits are selling for, what their equivalencies are. Is the market fluctuating? Is there something that, is this getting us any closer to seeing some real changes in how water is perceived and thus traded and used? And
That's a great question,
Why don't I step in and I don't have details on that, but I can tell you that what we've been hearing from a lot of the community in the area is that concerns about the prices of, as we get closer to hitting our cap in terms of the mitigation credits, concerns about prices increasing, about speculation around that. And we think those are conversations that we need to be having with the community in terms of what's the future path for the mitigation program. And so we've been having some ad hoc conversations with stakeholders around that issue for some time. I alluded earlier today that the Deschutes Basin is an area that we need to focus on, and this is one of the areas I think that we'll be looking at in terms of how do we make sure that we are creating the best flexibility for folks to achieve the mitigation that they need. I think there are going to be a lot of questions and some policy questions associated with that as we go forward.
yeah, that's one of the things, harking back to the OAHP, ag lands as different interests. Look to Oregon, look to the west, you see very different sort of buyers, very different sort of land uses, and it can be good, but they certainly can be big changes. And I think it would be interesting, especially for us to better understand that. I'm not sure how.
If I may, just I was in this seat at least a year ago talking about the need for us to engage a work group around the mitigation program, and we have not done that. And my hope is that we'd be able to get some additional capacity to be able to do that. And we asked for that additional capacity in our agency request budget. It didn't make it into the governor's budget. We still need to do that work with the Deschutes folks, and one of the challenges we have from a management standpoint is how do we carve out the time to be able to do that. The need is imminent.
Mostly a curiosity question, please, but I was wondering, you had mentioned and noted there are other mitigation banks already existing, and I'm just wondering what the Arnold Mitigation Bank does for them or anybody else that the existing banks don't do.
Well, I think to answer that question, right now we have one active mitigation bank, and that's the Deschutes River Conservancy, MB1. And I think that Arnold Irrigation District will be doing exactly the same thing as the existing bank. I'm not sure that they're going to be doing anything different. It's just an additional bank, which will be great for,
That's fair.
yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baumgartner and Chair Reeves, I would just add that the Arnold Irrigation District application proposes to provide mitigation credits to anyone, and they're using all methods of creating credits as a means to supply to others. So in-stream leases, permanent, in-stream.
Temporary,
Yeah.
everything.
Why do we need two, I guess, is the question. Why is not one central clearinghouse, so to speak, adequate? Is there a reason why?
Commissioner Corn and Chair Reeves, the rules don't give us any guidance on the number of mitigation banks we should have, or how many is enough. And we've enjoyed a very good working relationship with the mitigation banks we currently have in place, and we continue that to continue with this new application, if it's approved.
If I may add on this, as Sarah mentioned, this does provide some additional choices for, options for an entity who's looking to seek mitigation in the basin. And there's no cost to the state from this standpoint. So I think that it'll all depend on the market and the demand and the choices that the consumer in those areas will make in terms of who they want to do business with.
This has been the subject of an opportunity for public comment, this proposal. Is that right? Yes.
No comments
Yes,
received.
okay. And nobody, you haven't heard from anyone?
No, Chair Reeves, no comments were received as a result of the public notice.
Any other questions? So we do have a, Kirk Mogg would like to address the commission on this, so why don't we do that before we act? Kirk. If you would just state your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, for the record, Kirk Mogg from Stoll Reeves on behalf of Arnold Irrigation District. I'm here today to thank the department for its work in processing the application and to ask that the commission take action to approve the director's recommendation to approve a charter for the Arnold Irrigation District Mitigation Bank. And I would be happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Sure. I'm curious, as an attorney who's doing this sort of work, what sort of research have you found out there about where the trend is with the market for water mitigation credits?
So I would say that the purpose of the new bank is less about what the price of a particular credit is, and it's more about efficiency and, as Director Byler noted, the flexibility and increasing choices. Arnold Irrigation District has a full-time staff of 5 individuals, and one of the purposes of the mitigation bank would be to increase some efficiency for the district by pulling some of those. Arnold believes that it can take on these additional responsibilities, which are very similar to the types of activities that it already performs as a quasi-municipal entity in managing its own water rights and invoicing customers, filling out in-stream lease applications, and use existing staff to support that work, so that while there's currently a cost to the district in engaging in transactions with a third-party bank, that there can be efficiencies for the district by bringing those operations and costs in-house.
Do you know, is there anybody else out there, third-party, that's sort of studying this? Because if those prices drop, then all of a sudden it doesn't pencil out for the district anymore. So I would think that you all would have done some research on that.
Well, so I would say that the district has its own water rights, and with urbanization and species-related issues, there will be, regardless of the price of the credits, there will still be conservation activities occurring and credits generated. And so this is, it really isn't about, for the district, it's not about the price of the credit, it's about providing a way to manage and track those credits that are going to be generated moving forward.
Appreciate you all taking the risk on something like this.
Are there questions, comments? I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, ready for action? Do we have a motion on this one? Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the mitigation bank charter for our irrigation district in the form of a draft charter in attachment 1, and to delegate, I won't say delete, but delegate responsibility for finalizing the charter to the director in attachment 2.
Second.
All right. Kathy?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you both.
Thank you. And for the record, I have a clean copy of the delegation for
Okay.
to be signed, and I'll give it to Jennifer.
All right, thank you.
I'll just make one last comment for the sake of the other commissioners. I don't, this may be something you're all familiar with, but if you've tracked at all what's happened with the wetlands mitigation banking world in the last 15 years or so, there have been some pretty wild fluctuations, both in mitigation credit costs and, more importantly, in my mind, assumptions made by landowners and others who created mitigation banks that things were really going to pencil out, and many are finding that they don't. Some of the expectations down the road in terms of securing stewardship funding for those sites long-term and other things are becoming more difficult. So just to reiterate that's behind some of my questioning is these things can move pretty quickly, and all of a sudden they attract a lot of attention by people that perhaps don't do the due diligence that they might otherwise need to do. So again, just to encourage us to learn as much as we can about it and try and be thoughtful as it grows.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Actually, I appreciate that, Joe, because you brought up more background with the mitigation, but I was impressed, I just want to say I was impressed with the level of detail and commitment here in this agreement. And that really made me feel comfortable, but that doesn't take away your point that people are, and I think it goes back to your point of coming back later and really looking long-term at the mitigation program.
All right. Ready to move on to strategic planning?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom and Kim?
All right. Thank you, Chair Reeves, members of the commission. It may not seem that long ago that you were entertaining approval or ratification of the strategic plan. We wanted to update you on what's happened since that time. We have been busy, especially within the management team. Oh, I'm driving. This is excellent. We've been busy working on gearing up towards implementation. So we wanted to keep the ball in the air with you all in terms of the activity that we have in mind and keep the engagement. Just as a reminder, the strategic plan was an effort to help prioritize our work. We are an agency that has much more on our plates than we have the capacity to take on, and that's just a continuing struggle for us as an organization. We also wanted to tether ourselves more directly to the Integrated Water Resources Strategy and the recommendations that come out of that. There are many of them. What do we want to take on? How do we prioritize our work associated with that? We also have a significant interest in improving the workplace in terms of our productivity, modernization of our work, and making it a place that people enjoy coming to every day. And a third element is around communication, both internally, how do we communicate effectively with each other in-house and in the work that we're trying to carry out, but also importantly with our external stakeholders. So you may recall that the strategic plan itself was not granular. We didn't have a definitive list of things that we were going to take on, but rather we focused on three broad areas as priorities. One is to modernize our management of surface water and groundwater resources and meet in-stream and out-of-stream needs. Secondly, to work to secure our water future, essentially, in the face of increasing water scarcity. And third was that inward-looking focus on our internal efforts tied to our core values. So with the adoption of the plan, one of the takeaways that we had as a staff is, okay, what are we going to do? There are these three broad strategic areas. What's next? And that's what we've been focused on since November. We have had a number of meetings among the management team, including an all-day retreat, where we really rolled up our sleeves and started to think about, okay, what are the logical priorities as we go forward? And some of the goals that we were thinking about as we went through that analysis are, how do we achieve early success and build momentum around this? How do we need to make sure that we don't take on too much? Let's make sure that we are taking off bite-sized pieces that won't choke us, and also wanting to make sure that we have within that portfolio of early work projects that focus both internally and externally in terms of the value perceived around those. Of course, the context around this is that we're starting the 2019 legislative session, which is a huge black hole of energy and attention for us as a staff. Many all-hands-on-deck opportunities for us during the legislative session. So we need to be realistic about what we take on. And not only that, but we also have a lot of ongoing projects. So what I want to talk with you about is the approach that we propose. It has what we're calling a kind of an initial phase of implementation and the projects that we are looking to take on. The first project is the most important one, and it is, we consider it to be the foundation for implementing the strategic plan efforts. And frankly, I consider it to be foundational for us to just be a strong organization as we carry out our work. And the project simply is to develop and begin to institutionalize and practice using planning tools and organizational tools. And so there are several tools associated with this, and we see this as really important elements to us in terms of carrying out our work, not only under the strategic plan, but more broadly in terms of our organization ability and our ability to be able to prioritize. So there are three elements that we're looking at developing between now and September. One's a portfolio management tool, which will help us, I'll talk about that in a minute. Another is a project management tool, and the other is a Kanban board. They all served slightly different purposes that we'll talk about in just a second. We want to develop these and start utilizing them among the management team and make sure that as we develop them, that we think about them and how they suit our needs as an agency. And I also am interested in having everyone among the managers start to put these into practice. I think that it will lead to stronger project management, it will lead to better organization and prioritization for us as an agency. So I mentioned the retreat that we had in December. We spent the bulk of our time at that meeting learning from Ron Sarazin, who you recall has been our consultant on this project as we've gone forward, and has a deep understanding of how these tools can benefit organizations and teams that are working on issues. And we kind of, through the day, were exposed to those different types of tools, and did some exercises that kind of helped us put them into practice at a very cursory level, but I thought a meaningful level, because it helped us understand how these tools can help us wrestle with the volume of work that we have coming our way and be able to manage that a bit better. So let's tease this out a little bit more in terms of the three different tools. The portfolio management tool is simply a mechanism for us to be able to figure out how to prioritize the work that we have in front of us on a larger scale. There are at any given time a number of different issues that we know that we have pending, or projects that we have pending. The portfolio management tool helps us sort through those and decide what are the highest priorities for us to address. And I know that our staff do this exercise on a regular basis on their own, but we want to create a more institutionalized tool for us to do this, so that we are practicing this on a regular basis. And what I couldn't tell you today is just how every manager goes about this exercise. I think by doing this approach, it's going to help us sift through not only what are our priorities and what are we going to work on, but probably even more importantly, what are we not going to do? And I think that's the challenge that we've had, and I think that it still remains for us in terms of kind of listing out the larger inventory of workload, and recognizing that there are things that are part of our responsibilities that we're not going to be able to attend to because we don't have enough time. That's an issue that's been, I think, difficult for us to pin down. Building this tool and starting to utilize it will help us to make those decisions more intentionally and more transparently. Secondly is the project management tool, and this is a tool that we want to start to build into our systems and our operations so that we can help our staff and managers understand how we're organizing around and planning for a project that is going to be executed. This is particularly important. I think it's going to be most useful for those projects that involve staff from different sections and different divisions, where we've got complex issue that we're trying to move through a system. This project management tool will help us be more transparent internally in terms of how we're moving forward on our project. It will help us in terms of reporting out and creating expectations in terms of delivery of project goals, and importantly, from a succession planning standpoint, I think it'll be a very valuable tool for our newer staff who are looking to build their skills in terms of taking a project from cradle to grave, if you will. The Kanban board is yet another tool that is an organizational tool that is more, and Kim, you may need to help me out on this, but it's more oriented towards the day-to-day, how are we managing workflow associated with what we have on our plate. We have some managers now who are starting to put this type of tool into practice, and again, like these other elements, we are going to be developing some systems that we can all utilize to help us keep better organized. I don't know if you have anything to add on any of those elements.
Yeah, for the record, Kim Ogren with the department. Often I like to think of portfolio management and project management as approaches that you take on, versus the Kanban is specifically a tool and a visual way to track it. And maybe further back in the slide deck is a visual. So if folks are interested in more of the details of what that approach is, because the name doesn't really tell you anything, we could talk about that as well.
more accurately, Kim would talk about it. But I'm learning. I will learn. So Project One is really stripping it down to the fundamentals. We are wanting to build this organization and improve the organization, and we think that we need to have some very fundamental tools in order to be able to do that. We want to use these tools for our day-to-day business, for prioritization, as well as to ultimately fold the actions that we are going to undertake under the strategic plan. The other actions that of this 5-year plan will be folded into these tools as well. The second project, and these are prioritized, is to focus on our core values. You may remember the development of core values that we did and exercises that we had with staff over the last year and a half around developing a system of shared values that help kind of guide who we are culturally as an organization. So we've developed those, we have them, but what we want to do now is to really develop them into our day-to-day thought processes and actions as an organization. So we want to start working towards raising awareness, developing shared understanding, and integrating these values into our office and into our culture. We have this is a list of staff who represent different sections and divisions of the agency, both managers and other staff who are part of a core value committee, and they're going to be working on helping us implement this project, again, around integrating this into our culture and day-to-day lives more directly over time. What you have here are the 5 core values: forward-looking, integrity, teamwork, service, and technical excellence. I'm already starting to see this get incorporated into some of the email footers that we have from our staff, but we'll be looking at ways where we can start to highlight these values at all staff meetings, the signage around the office. There's a lot of different ways that we can approach this to start to build this into our DNA, if you will. And for this pie chart, there's nothing implied here with the integrity piece being taken out of the pie. Just for the record.
Right.
Thought you were highlighting.
Projects 3 and 4, and these are, we're for sure going to work on one of these over the next 6 to 9 months, and we may do both if we have the time. And these are more externally oriented, recognizing that we have goals and priorities under the strategic plan of kind of modernizing our systems and improving communication externally. And these are pretty simple IT-related, but meaningful IT-related tasks that we're going to engage on. One is to accept credit card payments at the front desk. That may, in this day and age, seem like a no-brainer, but it's something that it's a service that we don't provide today, and we'd like to. We have a lot to do in terms of incorporating IT into our systems and programs. This is a step in that, one of many steps in that direction. Another element that it's on our short list here is to have auto contact with applicants. I think these are permit applicants to help them understand where they're at in their process, so that we are providing a little more customer service and outreach. Some of you may know that we have very specific time frames associated with our application processes, and giving folks a heads up about key dates that they need to be aware of. If we can automate those, I think that would be very helpful for our staff as well as for the customers that we work with. So those are the projects that we're looking at. We're taking those on again in light of the workload that we have with the legislature in town. We're very busy, but we see these as important as a kind of fundamental building block effort. That was the first project that we talked about. That inward-facing project that would be the integration of core values into and among our staff, and then the two external projects. We're hoping to have these completed by September of 2019, and at that time, we're hoping that we can also use that as a springboard for focusing on other projects that will help us carry out the broader objectives that we identified in the strategic plan. And that's all I have. I'll check with Kim to see if I missed anything or if there anything that she has to add in terms of the staff report here.
I think that covers it. It's just if folks want more details about any of the things we discussed.
Just one quick question. It seems like a great job, and I like the focus on looking at what we can do, make sure we can actually do it, and then tracking it. I think that's so important, and it helps us make decisions whether to take on new projects. But I wonder, just as you look at right now during the legislative process, we have so much going on, if September is a realistic timeline to, I mean, because this is so important, and it seems like most of your staff is engaged in the legislative process and probably will be all the way through June, or a lot of your staff is. And so that's my only question. It just seems like tight, seems almost like you'd want to put that off for another 3 months, so these folks, 3 or 4 months, so they can finish that work and then work on this piece of it. So that would be my only comment. And I didn't know what'd you call that thing?
Kanban board.
Kanban was. I had to look it up, and it's pretty interesting. Is that like this huge board that everybody gets to see, or is it electronic?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Fott, Kanban boards can be both a physical, huge board as well as an electronic board. And one of the things that we would figure out as we develop the board for us is we would see what would make most sense. I would guess that it'd be electronic so that everyone in the department can access it versus having to be here in Salem. But what's on the screen is just a visual representation of what a Kanban board might look like. Generally, there's a to-do column, a doing, which could have lots of sub-columns, and then a done. And you just have little cards that have a discrete project or task depending on how you set it up, and you can move it through the process knowing that you can only have so many cards going on at one time, and if you want to put another card into the doing, you got to take something out, which really just makes it more tangible to make those choices of what we do and don't do.
Yeah, just a comment. I like this approach very much. I would like to see you consider adding a spatial component to this, having maps that show the regions and where the work is being done, and a schedule for that work. I would also like to see us have that as a feature of, maybe at the start of a meeting, we do a quick agenda review, and then we have a map of the state with the items that we're going to be reviewing, map, whether they're information or action items, and we see how we distribute our work across the state. I know some of our work is long-term, some of it's reactive, but I think we ought to be, as Tom said, intentional and aware of where we're expending effort and maybe where we need to expend it in the future to equitably distribute our effort across the state and the regions. And I like visuals, I like maps, and I just think it'd be helpful to see, okay, where are we talking about, where's the focus of the commission's effort this meeting, and over time, see how we're distributing it across the state. But it can also be part of this planning exercise.
Bob, did you have a comment? Oh, no, I was going to say, I like that idea of mapping you're talking about mapping the agenda, basically, right? That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage us. I think putting structure to your thought process and visualizing it really does help. I think at least when I worked for a state agency, one of the problems we wrestled with a lot was continuity on our priorities. We had lots of people who thought they ought to influence our priorities, so to speak. And I think that's something I'd like to see, similar to your spatial, is an understanding of what are our priorities, what are the metrics we use to identify our priorities, and how are we maintaining some continuity, if possible, on those priorities. And just as an aside, our laboratory was really struggling, so we set up a Kanban system for them. We are in the process of setting it up as well. And make a huge difference just to be able to see what's occurring, and it greatly relieved the level of stress that our staff was feeling, just to be able to visualize and see what was coming and understand how it fit into the district's or the agency's priorities. I just think it's a great one.
Yeah, I'll just add the warning that, was established for Toyota motor vehicle production. So if you can imagine people coming into an assembly factory, same place, same things, more or less, every day, being able to track something start to finish is comparatively easy when you're working on projects that maybe are not in-house physically, that are out in remote offices with different levels of people from a supervisor to manager to down to the field. You have incompletes and lack of information problems that all of a sudden really stagnate it. So I really appreciate the 9-month window, September, and just would encourage you to be really selective on what you try to track with it, because otherwise you can end up with a dead, and what it does is just, it can reinforce this sense like, shit, we're not making any, excuse me, sorry, darn, we're not making any progress, which completely goes against what you're trying to do with the strategic plan and the organization. So bravo, just be really thoughtful about how you and when you implement it. And I'm assuming you are, Kim, we're going to have to be the one really keeping things up to date, or because somebody does, and that's the only, the drawback to Eric's map is somebody's got to do that, and I know that it's a struggle to produce the commission reports as it is, so.
We'll certainly look into that, those requests, but Commissioner Mall, your point is well taken, and we've talked about that a fair bit. And I think Ron Sarazin, who is advocating for these things, would be the first to recognize that these are kind of widget tools that are best applied to widget making and kind of production line elements. We have programs that are more oriented that direction, and we have others that aren't. And so we're very aware of that in how we build this. And we also know that we have activities that are just ongoing. They're never ending, and there's no end point. They just continue. So how we build, but they are part of our workload. So how do we build those into this and recognize them, and also use them as a point of reference for practicing continuous improvement. Just because we've been doing something for a long time and it happens every year doesn't mean we do it the same every year.
Share a little fun fact that Japanese is filled with homonyms, and another meaning for kanban in Japanese is the person who's responsible for warming the sake before you drink it at a meal. So you might institute that too for the commission.
Add that to the next agenda. The warms up.
We'll see where that lands on our prioritization.
Look at that.
Have a second?
One other thing on the core values, I really appreciate the work that you're doing on that. A warning, don't stop at signs in the cubicles. That can kill core values so fast, it will make your head spin. It's always way more important that your managers act with those core values, demonstrate those core values to staff, because staff will pick up on that is the way we do things, quicker than having a cutesy poster in their cubicle. I've lived it, I've seen it happen, don't go there.
I think that's really sage advice, and you got to put it into practice, and a piece of paper or a poster doesn't cover it, and can sometimes lead to cynicism. But celebrating those, practicing and celebrating those values, I think is really going to be the key to making it real for people.
Yeah, having cute little tags on your sign off on your emails, like, yeah, cute.
What if everybody got a poster of Cindy?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Did somebody else, I thought I saw some, you were starting to say something. Yeah.
So I do want to follow up again. Thanks. I appreciate the comment about the 9 months. But I just want to reiterate, this takes thoughtful engagement with everybody. And if you're really busy, you're not going to give it the time that you need to. That's what my only concern there is, that you need your key people, everyone that's engaged, to have some free time to really think about it. And I don't get the sense there's a lot of free time at all right now with the legislative process. So I think this is important, but we have to finish what we're doing first and move on. And I just want to leave it with that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Appreciate that. So our next on the agenda is a proposal to designate a section of the Nehalem River as a state scenic waterway. We have Ken Starr, Ryan Andrews, Chris Havel to present. And, I was just going to say, thank you. A reminder, if you'd like to address this topic in public comment, to please fill out one of these forms and give it to either Jen or Cindy, who are over here. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Reeves, members of the commission, Director Byler. Before we start discussing the topic at hand, I want to do a little sidestep here and embarrass somebody. So this morning, Jennifer went through kind of a short bio, but she left something out that I thought was really significant in her life. You want me to do this?
I don't think
so. You might as well. So she's a very recent member of the Independent City Council, which I kind of think is a big deal. So.
That's cool.
Clearly the Google alert went out with Oregon Water Resources in the last 24 hours. So thank you.
And I'm sorry, you can get back at me later. So on a serious note, we're here to present to you some of the findings and some of the process, and of course, to ask for your opinion and concurrence on this issue. I had actually the privilege of attending a Parks and Recreation meeting, commission meeting yesterday. It was enlightening. It was actually fun. Not that these aren't. But they. You
want a shovel? Keep going.
Yeah. I'll hand this off to you, Chris.
Okay.
So what I thought I would do is just go ahead and say that they unanimously voted to send this on to the governor, or in this case, to you all for concurrence in part of the process of approving the scenic waterway. So we've got a couple of things to talk about here. One, the whole process, how this went. Chris will go over that. Ryan will go over kind of how we arrived at the flow protections. And then the last part, of course, will be for your feedback as well. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Chris Havel.
Great, appreciate that. Chair Reeves, Director Byler, members of the commission, my name is Chris Havel with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, here to present to you the Nehalem Scenic Waterway Study with a request to concur with the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Commission's decision yesterday to recommend this to the governor for designation. So I'll go through the background of the study process and stop me wherever you've got a question rather than waiting to the end, because I will be handing this off to your staff to bring it home and talk about the water implications, and I don't want to lose track of maybe some questions you have that are specific to the process more generally. So what we're talking about here, back up one. In case you're not already familiar with the State Scenic Waterway System, our department, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, is directed by statute to study new waterways for potential inclusion in the program. The program began in 1970 as a way to take rivers and protect their free-flowing nature and to limit development that would compromise their integrity over time. It was a long-reaching program, one that was inspired by the vision of Oregonians in the 1970s as today, to take the values that we hold in common and protect them in law. So scenic waterways, and there are more than 20 of them across the state right now, mostly rivers, one lake, are intended to, the program is intended to express that recreation, fish and wildlife are the highest and best uses of those waterways after they're designated. And in order to do that, waterways require landowners along their banks to notify our department whenever they plan to do anything that would compromise those values. Within a quarter mile of a waterway, if you're going to build, change vegetation, do anything that impacts the waterway visually or its biological integrity, that we get a notice. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about a draft management plan. But slow, steady growth in the Scenic Waterway Program was apparently always the intention of the legislature and the public when they passed that law. And it's our responsibility to study future candidates and bring them before our commission and then you on its way to the governor. There are other ways of designating scenic waterways, going through the legislature, going through the ballot measure, but this method is specific to our agency. So what we are doing here today is reaching the end of a study of the Nehalem State Scenic Waterway. The Nehalem River, specifically a 17.5-mile stretch that begins in Clatsop County and continues down into Tillamook County, was studied for potential inclusion in the scenic waterway. This stretch goes from Rierson Spruce Run Campground to the confluence of Cook Creek, which is just past the Cougar Valley State Park, which is not a park that's open or developed to the public, but some of you who may be familiar with that area have seen signs for that when you're wandering through this part of the Coast Range. So we are in the North Coast Range here, of course. So on our way to studying this waterway, we look at the physical attributes of the waterway to make sure that it qualifies, and then we also go through extensive outreach. You can see here a rough calendar from January 2017 to February 2019 that shows the different touch points that we had with the Oregon community and with our partner agencies during this study. We did have a stakeholder group made of people with local interest, people with statewide interest on both the conservation and recreation sides, helping us think through this candidate study. It takes us about 2 years to get to the point where we're ready to bring a recommendation back to our respective commissions. And part of that is driven by the nature of doing scenic waterway studies, where you want to have a good look at the waterway itself to make sure that it can sustain recreation over a long period of time. But also just to make sure that members of the community are fully informed of the process and have an opportunity to sound off. So we always learn something when we do a scenic waterway study. It would be great to sit in front of you and say, we have everything absolutely perfect, every step of the way. Except that would be both stupid and wrong to say something like that. And I am on record, yes. Great. So there was a time when we would do a study and bring it through the various commissions and then go to rulemaking afterward. We stopped doing that with this study, thanks to input that we received from this body, Water Resources Commission. One of the things that we learned this time around was that it's important to not just focus on the area that's being studied for inclusion, the 17.5-mile area where we contact all the landowners and we talk to people in the community in this area, but also to reach above that designated area, to talk to people who are using water, and you'll find out why later on, the implications for upstream water use. But we added that process now. We're going to reach out more concertedly to water rights holders upstream from the designation in any area that might be affected. That did happen this time. We'll talk later about our conversations with Columbia County and the city of Vernonia, as they're not in the scenic waterway area, but they're upstream from it and they are affected. We did have conversations with them and their input is reflected in the report that we have for you today. But that didn't happen until relatively late in the process. And one of the things that we learned this time around is we need to get those ducks in a row much earlier on. In spite of that one hiccup, we did have a pretty good run talking to an enormous number of people, far more than we've engaged with, even with our before this, our most recent nominations were for the Chetco River and the Molalla, and those were what we thought were well-rounded, busy processes, and they were. We heard from even more people this time around. So we did have letters, emails, we had public meetings in both Tillamook and Clatsop counties. Those minimum meetings are required by the statute. Our advisory groups and our individual conversations included not only the counties, our sister agencies, our major property owner on the private property side, Weyerhaeuser, while 80% of this 17.5-mile stretch is in public ownership, there are private landowners, and Weyerhaeuser is the dominant one among them, and they've been involved since the beginning. Our public comments, you can see we did receive some comments in opposition to the listing. Landowners, including Weyerhaeuser, Oregon Scenic Coast Railroad, Tillamook County sent an official letter from their commission opposing designation. We did receive a significant number of comments in support, ranging from the kind of well-intentioned but automated emails that we receive whenever there's public interest on a popular issue like this, but also a goodly number, nearly 70, individually written comments from people both in the area itself and who have statewide interest in protecting scenic waterway values. The Clatsop County Commission is also on record supporting the designation. Among those supporters, the things that they cited as holding meaning for them, that brought them to the point where they wanted to express support, was they liked the idea of protecting essential river values related to the scenery and fish and wildlife. They liked seeing actions to protect flow into the scenic waterway. This, we'll talk a little bit more, your staff will, about what the implications are for water flow. And in particular, there is such an inextricable link between waterway, its character, its integrity, and the identity of communities. I mean, we live next to water, we use water, we need it for every aspect of our lives, and people do get, sort of rightly emotionally invested in the future of water. And when a scenic waterway designation comes to their neighborhood, it prompts a conversation about those values and what's important about them. So among the concerns that we heard both from people who were opposed and people who were neutral, they were concerned that this might limit timber harvest, cause delays because of the way the program works. I'll talk about more about that in a moment. The general idea that if the government is showing up and saying we're here to make you feel better about your life, there's some level of distrust about those statements, that it's, yeah, we're doing all right, we don't need another government program or our community to show up on a map, that this might draw more people to our backyard. If you have a scenic waterway, while there's no promotion associated with that, we don't stick up a big neon sign or start taking out ads saying come float the Nehalem, but it's still, it shows up in the news, it does show up in reports and in online guides and whatnot. that they felt that people who were opposed to this or had misgivings about it felt that that might change the quality of life that they experience. There were also concerns in Columbia County, from the Columbia County Commission. They did write a letter in opposition stating that this would impact, not them today, but far into the future, that would affect the amount of water available for future allocation to water rights. It doesn't affect any water rights today. But if they grow to the point where there are new water right applications in an area that already has summer limitations, that's going to make their life harder at some point, constrain their growth in some way. The city of Vernonia, which does have a municipal water right here, was neutral, even though they face on their front line the same sort of question: do we have enough water to grow? Their current water right, as I understand it, was established when they were far larger than they are now, and they didn't have those same concerns, which is why they ended up expressing some neutrality. I think it's important at this point to put public comment in its right role. The criteria for a scenic waterway speak to being free-flowing, having outstanding character, being able to sustain recreation. Those are the things that qualify a waterway for designation as a state scenic waterway. Public comment is meant to inform your deliberations. There is no amount of public comment in favor that forces you to agree to recommend designation. There is no public comment against, no matter who it comes from, that stops the process and requires you to say no to it. These things are presented to you just to help you have a good conversation, even if you end up swearing, which is fine. But that's the role. So to some extent, tallies, they help you understand the weight of something, but they don't instruct you to do anything specific with it beyond that. So, yeah.
Question related to that: is there anything in the program or the rules that guide this whole decision-making process that directs the decision makers to take into account impacts like the ones that are being raised by those with concerns?
No.
It's really just the decision criteria is, does this segment qualify under these
Yes.
natural resource levels?
Now, you're allowed personally to consider anything you'd like, but you ought to know that the construction of the statute is about protecting values that are described in the statute. And it was, not every waterway is a scenic waterway. Not every waterway qualifies as a scenic waterway. And there are other stressors on water supply and water quality that have nothing to do with scenic waterways. Those are your context. But this law itself and the requirements in it talk about the free-flowing nature and preserving that and protecting recreation and fish and wildlife values. But that's the extent of it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mike?
Sorry, Bruce, did you want to? No, that's go ahead. So I just wanted to follow up. I hear the concerns. Will this impact, these concerns, will it impact their ability to harvest, their harvesting operations? I mean, they're given those concerns. Are there actual?
So that's an excellent question. And when I get done talking about some of the draft management plan stuff, your fine staff who know water will be able to speak to that. Ken, did you want to?
Timber, I think. Yeah, I was looking at, what I'm reading up here is the timber.
Oh, I'm sorry, timber. Yeah, so that's a good question. I'll dive briefly into what the scenic waterway process actually involves, and then you can decide for yourself whether it truly affects timber or not. So removing vegetation is one of the changes that prompts a notification to us. You will notice I'm paranoid about saying the word permit. There is no permit for scenic waterway changes or actions. We don't permit or prohibit anything. When you're going to make a change in a scenic waterway within a quarter mile, you notify us, and we look at the change and we compare it to the administrative rule that's passed to protect the values of that waterway. And I'll talk about how those rules are developed here next. But our favorite example, which I have to replace because we're getting bored with it, is I want to build a pink-sided house right on a bluff overlooking the river, and you'd be able to see it from the river. It's a disruption. You notify us. We ask you to move your house back or change the siding to something that blends in with the landscape as directed by whatever rules exist. In the case of vegetation, maybe I ought to use that one. So you're going to remove vegetation well within sight of the scenic waterway, and it's going to denude a section of hillside. You notify us. We look at it, we look at the plan to say, what does the administrative rule for that section say? Does it allow vegetation removal? And if it does, what do you have to do to replace that vegetation? And then if your request to us already fits the rules, we're done. If it doesn't, we send some recommendations back and ask for a change in your plan, whatever you were going to do. Maybe replanting sooner, replanting with a different kind of vegetation, whatever it happens to be. If you, as the landowner, decide you don't want to do any of that, you don't have to. You can wait a year and then proceed with whatever your plan was in the first place. What happens if you don't wait a year? I don't know. But what you get from us is, here's what we'd like. There's a negotiation back and forth that is almost always successful. Like 99.3% of the time, we end up with an agreement about a change. In those rare cases we don't, there's a 1-year waiting period. You get to proceed with whatever it was you were doing in the first place. How this affects timber is a matter of good coordination and calendaring on our part. Because those harvest plans, as part of the Oregon Forest Practices Act, they go through the Department of Forestry anyway, well in advance of a year. So for us, the way we would imagine something like this working is we get a review well more than a year before you plan to harvest. We get a chance to sound off on what changes we might like to see. Leave a little more here, leave a buffer there, whatever it happens to be. If for some reason that property owner doesn't want to do those things, they wait their year, that doesn't interrupt their schedule. They still get to do whatever they were going to do on their usual schedule because they've given us more than a year advance notice to do it. Does that make sense? And then they proceed. So there's no teeth in the law at all to give us an option to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do. It's all about negotiations.
Does the U.S. Forest Service follow your recommendation and their requirements then, or you're providing feedback to the U.S. Forest Service?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a sense of how that.
Where we border, where a scenic waterway goes through national forest land, we make the same recommendations.
They could, in a sense, make a requirement then based on your recommendation.
If they choose to. Yeah. They're not compelled to, of course. State law ain't telling the feds to do nothing, right? So, yeah, it is quite often, though, that our state scenic waterway designations overlap with the federal wild and scenic designation, which have their own requirements that the feds do have to follow, but that has nothing to do with the state scenic waterway system. So.
I just had a comment about, you said about public comment or the area where you was in really didn't have an effect, but as I recall, the Grand Ronde was pulled back because the community of the area didn't want that designation, and my impression then was that was the local community public comment was why that was withdrawn. Did I misunderstand how that, because we didn't vote against that, it was pulled back. That was a few years ago when we was considering 3 different ones. The other 2 communities was in support of it, and they went right through, but that one was withdrawn, and that's how I perceived that happen was.
Yeah. No, I understand that completely. While the county commission and there were locals who did not want the designation to go forward, it was withdrawn because it didn't qualify. That it didn't have recreation access that was necessary to meet the bar set in statute. Now, it also happened to have strong local opposition, but even with that opposition, if it had completely qualified, it would have at least gotten to this point. Okay. And then you would have heard that, in addition to the fact that it qualifies, here's what we're hearing on the ground, decide what you will. But we don't stop something just because somebody says, we don't like the idea. We listen to those things and we say, well, in what way could we either draw a boundary or recommend management that would make you happy? Because we want to be responsive to what we're hearing on the ground. But if it qualifies, it qualifies, and our report will reflect that.
So in that particular instance, it didn't qualify. It wasn't the public comment as much as it didn't meet all the qualifications. Okay, thank you.
Right, awesome. So in addition to providing a report that you have a copy of that looks at the qualifications, we also work with a stakeholder group to propose a draft management plan. So this is, you see the word draft all over this because it does not have the weight of rulemaking. It doesn't set anything in stone. It's just the what if. What if our commission recommends designation, you concur, it goes to the governor, governor designates, the legislature doesn't override that designation. I've just shortcutted all the way through that process, and it ends up being designated. A rulemaking team forms to say, all right, here's what that actually means to things like structures and vegetation and recreation facilities and commercial development and all of these other particular details. And then sometimes that's when you would find out, oh, if I'd known that, I would have changed my mind about my public comment, or one of the commissioners might have changed their mind. So instead of waiting until the end, we go through a what if and say, all right, how should this work? And while it's not a required part of the process, we worked with an advisory group. We sent a draft management plan out for public comment. We held meetings. We made revisions and put that into the report as an appendix. And you've got the details there in front of you. That's where you find out how the rubber is going to meet the road on those things. If this is designated, we'll go through the regular rulemaking process, and it may change. But we want to at least get, 3/4 of the way down the road to explain to people what the implications are. So when you go in to develop the management plan, you work within the bounds of the Scenic Waterway Statute, that this protects river landscape within a 1/4 mile of the banks, that the sorts of things that you tend to see are development and changes ought to blend in with the landscape or be invisible. The process of setting minimum water flows occurs at this stage as well. Once again, it doesn't enact any changes. It simply says in order to maintain the fish and wildlife and the scenic character and the recreation, here's how much water you need. And because the Scenic Waterway Act requires waterways to be free-flowing, there are always prohibitions on dams, reservoirs, and placer mining. The things that the management plan does not address, because the law itself doesn't give it the authority to address it, it doesn't change water rights. It doesn't change any use that's on the land. It doesn't change anything that exists in place on the property. And it doesn't automatically promote use of the river. The management plan is about protecting values by entering into negotiations with adjacent landowners within the designated stretch. So within that general framework, we look at the character of the waterway and assign a classification, one or more, to the stretch that's being studied. Scenic waterway is not just one thing. There are 6 classifications, ranging where you see Natural River up near the top there. Those are the most pristine, the most untouched, frankly, the hardest to reach rivers in the scenic waterway system, all the way down to river community, which are the most urban, generally the most developed, where you can see the most evidence of human beings. And in between those is the spectrum of scenic waterways. And there are general guidelines written into the law about how the rules ought to apply to each one of those sections. So at the beginning of the management plan discussion, it's, all right, let's look at the waterway the way it is today and decide which one of these 6 classifications it fits best. In some cases, when you're studying a particularly long stretch, you might divide the river into segments and say, all right, we've got 17 miles here, we're going to take 8 miles and call it this, and another 9 miles and call it that. In the case of the Nehalem, it's pretty consistently the same for this whole 17.5-mile stretch, and scenic river designation is the one that was selected, which is so it's in the middle of the pack. It's not absolutely pristine, what you would think of as like a high mountain river or something. There's evidence of humans on the landscape. Pasturing, forest practices, some evidence of roads. You can see portions of the old Salmonberry Line Scenic Railway through this area. Those things are part of the landscape, and there's nothing in the management plan that says you have to eliminate or hide any of those things. They're accepted as one of the natural features. So those classification attributes then flow into the specifics that are in the draft management plan. So screening new structures, not the existing stuff, but anything that you put in new, to the extent possible. Blending in recreation like trails and footbridges and whatnot might be visible, but you need to do them in a way that protects the resource and that they look like they fit in with the landscape. That if there are going to be new roads or other forms of development, that they be screened as well, that we control erosion, that you use native vegetation to screen development wherever possible. A lot of these things are like, yeah, you see them in a lot of scenic waterway plans, and they seem like common sense. And it's the areas where we tend to find the easiest negotiations with landowners. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize you could see this fence where I was going to put it from the river. I can move it 5 feet, and you won't be able to see it anymore. And while our boundary here is a 1/4 mile from the bank of the river, if it's not visible and it doesn't affect the river another way, it could be 100 feet away. But if it's not visible and it doesn't affect the waterway, you won't see any kind of request or condition from our field coordinators to make a change. So they take these notifications they get from landowners, and then they go visit the site and they say, could I see it? And that informs the rest of their negotiation with that landowner. So that leads us through the process that we've gone through to date. You might have copies of some additional comments that we received even after our formal public comment period closed. That would include the letter from the City of Vernonia, the letter from the Columbia County Commission, and some other both supportive and otherwise comments that we get from just nonprofits, citizens of the state, people who live in the area, and so on. This has attracted a lot of attention, as you know it would. We have a different community that lives along the Chetco than lives in northwest part of the state, and you can see that in the character of the comments. There is general agreement among Oregonians that rivers have values that are important to protect. The Scenic Waterway Program does that, and it's not just about designation, but living with that designation afterward, going through rulemaking to make sure everybody truly is in agreement, or as close as we can get to it on management rules, and then turning it over to field coordinators who work with state park staff, water resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Forestry. The work to live with a scenic waterway begins after the designation happens. So before I turn it over to your staff, did you have any questions just generally about the process, the intent, what happens afterward, that sort of stuff?
Just one pretty fine scale question. Your previous slide, curious the guidance on riparian buffers. I think that when in some ways kind of like the federal wilderness legislation, the values that are recognized and protected under the Scenic Waterways Act extend far beyond scenic. And I'm curious how enhancing scenic view is being applied now when it comes to riparian areas, because certainly in the last 30, 40 years, our understanding of interactions between riparian areas and rivers has changed a fair bit.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think it's one of the areas where the Scenic Waterway Program doesn't deliver as well as it does on protecting scenery, because it is easy to measure the effects on scenery, right? Anybody can sit on a river and say it looks good or it doesn't. This complex interaction between riparian vegetation, soils, shade, and how that affects fish and wildlife values and water quality values, we're not as mature in the Scenic Waterway Program on the ground as we need to be on those points. In this plan, we call out the need for more interaction between Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife staff and Department of Forestry and their forest harvest plans. They already do that. But what this plan says is, but this is a scenic waterway, we'd like you to pay particular attention to these qualities. And we're working right now, an interagency group, Forestry, Fish and Wildlife, DEQ, and others, to say how can we cooperate better to protect these values. That work is in early stages. Our field coordinators were, of course, they're always ahead of us, right, on the management side. They were already making those calls and doing what they could. They just didn't have a lot of guidance to do it, and most of these management plans and documents were silent about how you do those sorts of things. So we're starting to see more specific language about that. And once again, there's no hammer here. It's just, are the right people looking at it in a way that protects values like these? And what are they doing with that when they see something that needs to be called out? You know, do they have an avenue to express their concern? And now they do with this kind of plan.
That's encouraging, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Mallory now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Reeves, members of the Commission, Director Byler. For the record, my name is Ryan Andrews. I'm a hydrologist with the department. I will talk about how we came up with our flow recommendation and sort of the process that we used to came up with that, and what the designation would mean for stakeholders' water rights within the watershed. So again, this is just to review. This is a map showing the proposed designation reach, and then including the upper parts of the watershed, Vernonia, Columbia County, and the other two counties. And so just to refresh, Tillamook County has sent a letter opposing designation. Clatsop is in support of the designation, but this isn't updated with Columbia County's opposition to designation, and Vernonia's neutral support or neutral view of the designation. And so it's important to consider how Columbia County and Vernonia would be affected by the designation, and so we'll get to that based on what the scenic waterway designation would do for water rights and how those in the upper portion of the watershed would ultimately be affected. So this slide will just go over what the impact of scenic waterways would do on water rights. And so scenic waterways are designed to protect water in stream, and so we do that through WRD's allocation system. And so what we'll do is we'll remove the portion of water that we're suggesting to protect from our allocation, and it will be removed from future water availability. And so the designation would limit future diversions within and upstream of the waterway, and it may become a permit condition on future water rights, and I'll explain what that means in a second here. And so what the designation does not do is it doesn't affect any existing uses within the watershed. So any currently existing or senior water rights to the potential designation, those would not be affected within the watershed of the scenic waterway. It doesn't affect future uses downstream of the waterway, as that water would remain available. And water rights, scenic waterways are not water rights, nor are they enforced as water rights. And so this kind of ties back to that third bullet on meaning scenic waterways may become permit conditions. So since they aren't water rights, how we may enforce that water remaining in stream for the scenic waterway, we may attach that as a permit condition, meaning that if that flow isn't met within the scenic waterway for junior users, we may put that on as a permit condition for in the future, saying that if we're not meeting the flow within the scenic waterway, we can regulate you off.
And I'm sorry, I had a brain freeze. That's for junior uses? That last part?
Yes.
That's sort of a what-if sort of a scenario. If there were a use that would be allowed subsequent to issuing the scenic waterway, we would insert a permit condition that would say, if the scenic waterway isn't being met, you'll be regulated off. So it's similar to kind of what we do now for permit conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, Mike.
Yeah, I kind of had the same question. Which one has the priority? I think that's what we're getting to is, I'm looking at your chart here, and it shows during May through September, there's no new routes, but you're setting specific flows in the river. What happens during drought years? If the flows are lower, who has the priority? The higher water, the historic water right, or this new designation?
Again, this is kind of going to want to be one of those scenario cases where what if we did issue something, and then what if the flows were incredibly low? So what if we had a drought year? Then we would defer to that permit condition in favor of the scenic waterway. And so in a low flow year, we set the scenic waterway at 500, and the flows are at 20. And I know that's an extreme,
No, I think
but that's exactly what we would do. I would surmise.
And so we came up with our recommended flow protection, and so this will go over what our suggestion is. So we are suggesting to fully protect remaining water available from April through October. And given what the intent of the scenic waterway designation is intended to do is to protect those highest and best uses of water, being recreation, fish, and wildlife, we are suggesting this full protection from April through October because those flows would maintain flows important for ecosystem function, fish survival, and recreational value. So those are critical months for aquatic ecosystems to function given the increasing temperatures during the summer months. And then those springtime flows and late summer, early fall flows are important for also maintaining life cycle functions of the aquatic ecosystem. And so keeping those intact so that we can still encourage the development of the aquatic ecosystem. And so that's why we are suggesting to fully protect those flows from future water availability during those months. And for the winter months, we will shift a little bit to protecting 85% of remaining water availability from December through March. Given the increase in water available, typically available during those months, we're ratcheting back to 85% because we would still like there to be some water available in the future for future development, but based on research from Locke and Paul in 2011, they suggested that fish habitat can withstand a 15% instantaneous reduction in flow. And so keeping that 85% water available during those months would allow for those ecosystem functions to be maintained, but we would also leave the 15% of water available for development during those months, and that would of course be in the form of off-channel storage because we cannot impede the free-flowing nature of the stream. And so again, it's important to consider that that water available during those months would need to be in some form of off-channel storage.
Question?
Yeah.
So what about November? Is that April through November, or is that?
Oh,
November
sorry. It's supposed to be November through March. It's still considered. So November through March would be 85% of remaining. And so, yeah, here you can see that November would also be protected. And so this chart is supposed to be a representation of a comparison between what the median natural flow is currently, and so that is the water available. And then the brownish color is the theoretical scenic waterway flow. And so, again, you can see that full 100% protection from May through October. And then the November through April, So April through October, we're suggesting 100% protection, but this graph doesn't reflect that. And then November through March, we're suggesting 85% protection. Yeah. And so ultimately what this would do is leave about 190,000 acre feet available for development during those winter storage months. And so what this ultimately equates to approximately is 3 times the volume of Henry Hagg Lake. And so that's a significant amount of water that would be remaining for availability for, of course, wintertime storage. And so this, in the recommendation process, we are We are at the point where Parks has unanimously voted to support the designation, and so we are asking for the commission's vote in the recommendation process. And so following that, whether the commission concurs with the designation, we would forward that to the governor for her determination of whether we would designate this portion of the Nehalem River as the state scenic waterway. And so this is cited in ORS 390-855. And here are the alternatives and recommendation that we will propose. And so the commission can either concur with the Parks and Recreation Commission on the designation for the Nehalem River as the state scenic waterway and approve the proposed flow recommendation. The commission can concur with the Parks and Recreation Commission on the designation. However, you could also suggest to defer setting the flows at this time and propose an alternative. And then the third option, of course, is to not concur with the Parks and Recreation Commission on the designation of the Nehalem River. And so our suggestion, our recommendation is to concur with the Parks and Recreation Commission on the designation of the Nehalem River as the state scenic waterway and approve the proposed flow recommendation. And that is, and now we'll open it up for questioning.
Thank you. That was helpful. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to reiterate that it goes from, if you concur, going to the governor, and it lands on her desk, it's likely there's going to be another sort of round of some of the basic issues that have come up during this. From timber harvesters, governor's office is likely to hear this is yet another restriction, even though it's a pretty soft one, but it still is, in their view, and the way they expressed it in public comment, another cook in the kitchen when it comes to timber harvest. And that was the basis of Tillamook County's opposition as well. From the proponents, you're likely to hear things like there aren't enough restrictions in here that improve and protect water quality. That things ought to be going further and that there ought to be more action and more teeth in it to protect some of these essential values. That discussion doesn't end here. It just moves to the governor's office and then from there to the legislature. In a way, the legislature has the final say because they can override the governor's designation decision with a joint resolution. They have until they adjourn to do that. So no matter what the governor's decision is, it doesn't become effective until the legislature adjourns. Which is why we bring these during these long sessions. And that's likely to be our pattern, is to continue bringing any scenic waterway designation to these commissions in preparation or in the middle of a long session rather than in between. So just wanted to make sure we understood that.
And I'd like to insert one other comment. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, but let me just lay it out. The first point I want to make is that as we speak, water is not available from August through October for live flow withdrawals. But I'd also like to say that once the scenic waterway is designated and the flows are set, the department's allowed to allocate another 1 CFS. So there are some caveats about that. I don't really want to kind of, again, go down that rabbit hole. But just for your, for your thought process, this isn't a hard, fast, nobody else will ever get any water. So we can allocate up to 1% or 1 CFS of the mean monthly flow. I can't remember what statute says now, but.
Mike?
Just a couple more. So what year on your, Ryan, on your analysis of the 1-year analysis of flows, what year did you use for is it this? It says your chart here that talks about your flows, 50% exceedance, consumptive use.
Yes, we used the current period of record, which is 58 through 87.
And the reason I asked that, I wonder if it wouldn't have been better to look back at those drought years equally. You're trying to get more normal flow, is that why you're doing that?
Yes, Commissioner Flott, again, we're trying to base this on the same statistical approach as our allocation process.
Gotcha.
And it's based on that period of record. So it just stood to reason that we would kind of keep those apples and apples together kind of a thing. That is a wise observation as far as, so what about moving that period of record forward and trying to reflect lower trends?
Well, I was thinking more of a blend of several years than trying to target this.
Well, and again, if we used a period of record where flows were low or a blend of that, then again, we're skewing things. So we kind of needed to make sure that the data was similar so that when we say we're going to set these flows at the median, that it's that same median that we use for our allocation process.
And then the other question, Ryan, you'd mentioned that almost 190 acre feet, 190,000 acre feet of available water for storage. Is there because I also saw your previous slide said no dams, reservoirs. So where would that storage take place?
It would need to be in the form of off-channel storage, so a reservoir off-channel somewhere.
So reservoir couldn't be built on you're talking about a reservoir like a dam versus just an off-storage site.
Yeah, so this, it wouldn't be able to be an in-channel dam, damming up the free-flowing nature of the stream. It would need to be diversion off-channel.
I appreciate that because I was having a hard time seeing how you could do that with the restrictions. Now, this one does become if we approve this, it does become the hammer. You mentioned there's no concept, but the Water Resource Department in this action, there would be a hammer in terms of flows. Definitely. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Yes, Bruce.
Well, that becomes my concern a little bit because of changing climatic conditions and all that. You're setting something in stone with figures that maybe aren't relevant to the period of time we're in. And I guess there's no way to, under the law and the way we're working on that, but it almost seems like a 20 or 30-year review to reset those flows would be something logical to do, considering that we are in changing pattern, or at least that's perceived at this point that we're in a changing pattern, especially if you're using data from, say, 1970 to 2000. I mean, this last 20 years has been kind of a changing pattern. Just a thought. I mean, I don't think the law allows us to do those kind of things, but it seems like that would be a common sense approach to work towards.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Corn, that's a very good point, and that would probably resonate with all of the flow levels that have been set for scenic waterways in the past as well. So we kind of mentioned these aren't water rights. And I would just kind of throw this out to Director Byler as a point of discussion, if we dare do that. But I think but this whole topic has come up as far as amongst staff in the past, in that these aren't in-stream water rights with a permit certificate, and that these flows, as you're aware, have been approved by the Commission in the past. And I would think that they would be subject to review by the Commission in the future. He's going to talk to me later, right?
Yeah. So,
It's like he wants to talk right now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm speaking a little out of turn here because I'm not a water person, but the method by which Water Resources ensures that there's enough water for these purposes, that method is not set in the statute. You decide based on court decisions, by the best science available, and by the guidance from leadership, how to execute that responsibility. But the exact method, that's up to the discussion. So.
And again, case in point, I'm sorry.
Well, maybe I should let you finish because I'm veering off in another direction.
I'll try to stay in this direction. So past practice was setting flows based on recreational publications that said, here are the ideal flow values for this particular river, this particular reach. So it was a recreational kayaker's guide to here's what we need for good boating experiences. The difference that we've done in the recent past is using the same statistical method that we used to arrive at whether or not water is available. So we've blended this in to a program that we have in a more similar approach, rather than say, here are the ideals, and it kind of plays into what Chris was saying, as well as Commissioner Corn.
I wanted to, this might be a question that could just be answered without regard to this specific proposed designation, but does the designation of a scenic waterway flow impact groundwater use? And if it's, maybe in abstract, I mean, it seems to me that it would not, but I don't know. Because it's not a water right, basically.
Well, it can.
Okay.
And it would kind of depend on the nature of that groundwater use, of course.
So what kind of groundwater use could it affect?
Well, so we came from a discussion yesterday, for example, about holistically managed.
Oh, yeah, and interconnected, clearly, but,
So if we could establish that this is an interconnected system, then yes, it would affect future groundwater use.
in the same way that it would, you could put a permit condition in there that says,
Yes, and we can also allow another 1 CFS.
okay, but it wouldn't have to be, it would only be if it's a permit condition, right? Because it's not a water right?
So let's think about the Deschutes Basin and this mitigation program that we're
Right.
talking about. The reason we have that program is because of our deeper understanding through the groundwater study about the interconnection between surface water and groundwater.
Right.
We also have scenic waterways in that area, and as a result of that combination, we have, in order for new groundwater uses to be made, they have to mitigate for that use by putting surface water mitigation in. So there can be a very direct impact on groundwater uses. You know, it's going to be basin dependent, where you have the information and where you have the hydrogeology that has that highly connected interface, but it can have a dramatic impact on a basin from that standpoint.
So we did that, that was a rule, right? And so programmatically, we did that. And there's no, it's not an in-stream right that's being protected, it's a scenic waterway flow. Okay.
And that 1 CFS I keep talking about in the Deschutes has been triggered. So hence we had to go down the
Right.
road of a mitigation program.
Yeah. Well, this is where, talking about it as not a water right, it's a little amorphous, I would say, because we're kind of treating it like a water right in that scenario. Which I'm not objecting to, I'm just trying to get clarity about what this is going to mean, basically.
And again, back to that phrase, it's the highest and best use of the water. This concurrence triggers that.
And maybe what I'm hearing interpreted is that this designation controls how much water is available for a water right. It takes water out of stream. So it's essentially, it's not there if we do this designation.
Yeah.
It's not available.
Yeah.
Definitely doing that, but it's doing a
The way
little
to
bit
look
more
at it
than
is,
that.
we wouldn't regulate for it as a priority right in distribution of water in a water short year, but it does impact future allocations. That's
Future
what
allocations, right. Okay, thank you.
Or can impact
Yeah.
future allocations.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, time for public comment. Thank you all. We may be talking with you again before we're done. Eric Fernandez, Oregon Wild.
Chair Reeves, Commissioners, my name is Eric Fernandez. I'm with Oregon Wild, and I'm here to speak on behalf of our 20,000-plus members and supporters. I thank you for taking the time to deliberate this and do your homework on the technicalities. I also appreciate your staff's time over the last 2 years to do the vetting process, as well as state parks. There's been more than a lot of homework done on this to sort through all the ins and outs and come up with a draft management plan and all of the benefits and challenges here. So I think the vetting has been fairly thorough on this, which is a testament to staff's work. As far as the water rights go, I think you've touched on this substantially, but, again, just want to emphasize that, some of those upstream concerns about potential future needs are somewhat accounted for, given that there is more availability in those winter months for storage, and that no existing water rights would be diminished by this. On a basic level, I would also bring us back to the 30,000-foot level of the Nehalem's just a cool river, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. Whether for wildlife purposes of marbled murrelets and bald eagles, or deer and elk, or the salmon and steelhead in the river, it's an impressive spot. Or if your thing is recreation, this is a great place for kayakers. A lot of those comments you heard about, a record-setting number of comments in support of this designation for state parks, were from recreationists and kayakers and floaters. It's also just a good place on a hot summer day to jump in and cool off. So if you haven't been to the Nehalem, I encourage you to visit it perhaps on a hot summer day. I think it also is, an important river to think about, those different attributes and values to be handing down to the next generation. And also putting this in context, if we look at the Coast Range, there are so few rivers that have been protected in the Coast Range. Most of the rivers in Oregon that have been protected are in the Cascades or elsewhere. The Coast Range, the only state scenic waterway is the Nestucca and the Walker Creek tributary there. So there's a significant underrepresentation in the system there. And the Coast Range rivers are great and important and haven't gotten their fair share of protection yet. So I think designating the Nehalem as a state scenic waterway would be an important step in that direction. As has come to light in this previous conversation, I'm reminded, I wish the protections were stronger than they were. This is soft conservation. It's still important and still valuable, but it's soft and has a fair amount of flexibility in it. We often refer to what Chris was talking about as the one-year escape clause. If you want to do something in the river corridor and state parks, you're not able to negotiate, you're in that 0.001%, you just wait a year and you can go through the escape clause and do whatever you want. But again, I appreciate your time considering this, and on behalf of our members and supporters, I would encourage you to recommend this to the governor as a state scenic waterway, option one that you have. And again, thank you for your time, and if you have any questions.
Questions? Guess not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, wait a minute. Oakley Brooks, Wild Salmon Center.
Charles and the commission, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. And I just want to say Oakley Brooks for the Wild Salmon Center for the record, and we're here first off to thank staff from Parks and Water Resources. They're really thorough 2-year process to listen to folks in the community and all the stakeholders around this proposed designation and really sort of thoroughly take it through the process. I think that's to be commended, and we appreciate it. My colleagues were part of that process. We come here today to talk to you first because the Nehalem is a salmon stronghold. It's one of the last best we've got in Oregon. If you're a wild steelheader, you know that this is a great spot, and it's got runs from Coho and Chinook as well. Those runs really drive a strong recreation economy on the coast, in addition to just being something that we love to go out and do. And we know that the coastal economy, the recreation economy, is a way to diversify the economy out in those communities. So it's important to really think about that in this designation, that context. We also, as Eric mentioned, this is, one of the very few, this would be one of the very few designations to protect a waterway out in the coast. And the state has made some investments to protect forest land in high-value conservation areas in the public lands around this, and this would sort of be a nice nexus to sort of secure water protections as well to help wild salmon and recreation out there. So we would recommend that you forward this to the governor, and we'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. Kimberly Priestley, Water Watch.
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Kimberly Priestley, and I'm here representing Water Watch of Oregon. Water Watch is here today to support the director's recommendation in option 1. The citizens of Oregon passed the Scenic Waterway Act in 1970 by a 2-to-1 margin. This is an incredibly important tool to ensure that the scenic, recreation, and fish and wildlife values of Oregon's most treasured rivers are protected into the future. As we heard from the Wild Salmon Center and Oregon Wild, the Nehalem River is exactly the type of river that should be protected under this act. The river provides important habitat for coho, spring and fall chinook, steelhead, and sea-run cutthroat. As we heard from Oregon Wild, it allows for a broad spectrum of recreation, whether angling, swimming, boating, camping, hiking, picnicking. It is a much-loved river. As we heard from the Department of Parks, the Scenic Waterway Act does direct the Commission decisions with regard to making recommendations to the governor based on 3 criteria. 1, the river is relatively free-flowing and the scene as viewed from the river and related adjacent land is pleasing, whether primitive or rural pastoral, or these conditions are restorable. 2, the river or segment of river and its setting possess natural and recreational values of outstanding quality. And 3, the river or segment of river and its setting are large enough to sustain substantial recreation use and to accommodate existing uses. As we heard from the earlier presentation, Parks unanimously found that the Nehalem River meets the statutory standards required for designation. Water Watch appreciates the very hard and thorough work of both the Parks Department and the Water Resources Department over the past 2 years, and we strongly concur with Parks' assessment here. As to the recommended flows, as you heard from the presentation, the Act does require that the state maintain the free-flowing character of these waters in quantities necessary for recreation, fish, and wildlife. To this end, we do support the flows as recommended by the department. As you heard through the presentations, the stream, it's already closed in the summertime, so it will not have an effect on future use as far as summertime use, and there is ample water for storage in the future. And again, that would need to be off-channel storage, but frankly, most storage we're seeing today is off-channel anyway. And also, just to drive the point home, existing uses are not affected at all by this designation. So in a drought year, existing users would not, they would still take precedent over scenic waterway flows. So in closing, I will state again what I stated at the outset, which is that the citizens of Oregon passed this law in 1970 by a 2-to-1 margin, and we believe the Nehalem River meets the intent and mandates of that law, and we would urge the Commission to concur with the decision of Parks on its path to getting this river protected for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Claire Clark.
Chair Reeves and the members of the committee, Claire Clark, testifying on behalf of myself as a private party. I didn't even plan on saying anything today. The testimony before me speaks for itself for those 3 folks. One of the things I do have to say is that, and it disturbs me really greatly, is that we're always talking about future allocations. Somebody's going to have a water right here, somebody has a water right there. We don't have water. Our groundwater is disappearing, the surface water allocations, if everybody used their right, it would be dry. I just don't see this as being a factor other than keeping water in the river for future generations. As a member of the American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association, I advocate for rainwater catchment for not only individual uses but industrial. And we've made the jump from a 55-gallon barrel to like 5 million gallon systems, 4, 5, 6 acre feet for both use in potable systems and irrigation and in stormwater control. So any kind of use in that basin in that particular stretch of the river could easily be done with rainwater. The average rainfall at Vernonia is listed at 48 inches. I really think that's a little low, but 48 inches, and then at Tillamook it's 88. So that's a source of water that nobody really talks about at this point. And so it's just, we just have to really realize the fact that we have a population that is already using the water. To talk about more allocations in every direction with municipal populations growing and everything like that, I just think it's unwise planning for the future. Questions? Thank you.
Do you mind giving clarity on whether or not you support the recommendation?
Yes, I would support it. Yes. But I do have to say that that comes from I haven't done the research on it. That's why I'm saying I'm only commenting on this water portion of it. But I do support scenic rivers for future generations.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's the last yellow card I have. Is there anybody here who wanted to speak to this that didn't? Looks like there is not. Commissioners, further discussion?
Yeah, I think I appreciate staff, the feedback on the water rights. As I look at this chart, I had several concerns. Is the one CFS is great that that's there to mitigate. I think the off-site ability to take that 190 CFS and store that is really important for me as we look at future drought. I think that helps mitigate some of the concerns I had. Be interesting on the park side, because part of as I think about the long-term process, trying to keep your flows where they are, in the scenic side, there may be some, I know parks have grant projects as well, but maybe the parks would want to look at some off-site storage as well to make sure those flows can be met during really heavy drought seasons as well. And I don't mean to recommend that tonight. I'm just saying I appreciate you guys giving me the feedback I needed, because as I say, when I looked at this chart, it looked pretty glowing, I thought, when I first looked at it. So thank you.
Eric?
Ready for a motion, do you think?
Go on. I think we are. We can always further discuss after it's made if we need to.
Madam Chair, I recommend the commission concur with Oregon Parks and Recreation Commission on the designation of the Nehalem River as a state scenic waterway and approve the proposed flow recommendations in Table 1.
I'd second that.
All right. Do we have any further discussion? Moved and seconded? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Kathy?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 All right. That motion carries. The designation goes to its next place, or the proposed designation goes to its next place. Thank you all of you who came and spoke to us about this. We appreciate it.
Do you have a discussion comment for the commission? And again, thinking of our strategic planning discussions, I think, Chris, Mr. Havel, the recognition of all of us doing a better job of looking upstream and downstream of a segment is telling here, the situation in Vernonia or any of the upstream, downstream communities The intersection between water planning and land use planning is something that is called out in the integrated water resource strategy, something we talked about strategic plan. This is where rubber hits the road, because it becomes something that, on the positive side, that the designation of a scenic waterway should elevate the discussion in the communities upstream and downstream as it becomes a part of reinforced in the culture of this is an important river flowing. How should that limit what we're willing to accept in land use and other things going forward? It's a great point of leverage for, I think, interaction with other aspects of land use planning in the state.
All right. Eric?
And I just want to add to that, when we think about that intersection, there was talk about the riparian zone, for example, earlier, and we need to consider the entire floodplain, particularly with land use planning and its potential impacts to surface and groundwater interactions.
Thank you. Okay. I think our last agenda item is any other, thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. And I also wanted to thank Ken, Ryan on your staff, Jan Hunt, Trevor Taylor on the State Park side for getting this all moving and incorporating scenic waterway values into strategic plans that exist, integrated water resources strategy, one of them, conservation strategy, another, and there are other plans throughout the state that could use a touch here, and we're going to continue working on that.
All right,
So,
great.
thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any requests for public comment generally? No. Well, then, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.